call the Tuesday, January 12th, 6 p.m. Meeting to order. It is now 6:01, and if you could please do a roll call.
Yes. Trustee Craig. Trustee Estimer.
Present.
Trustee Freitas.
Here.
Trustee Green.
Here.
Trustee Lamos.
Here.
Trustee Pomponio.
Here.
Trustee Sage.
Here.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. All right, now I'll accept the motion now to go into closed session for contract negotiations.
Mr. President,
Mr. Green.
I make a motion that we move to closed session for the purpose of negotiations.
Support.
Thank you. And roll call vote that for us, Sharon.
Yep. Trustee Craig. Trustee Estimer.
Yes.
Trustee Freitas.
Yes.
Trustee Green.
Yes.
Trustee Lamos.
Yes.
Trustee Pomponio.
Yes.
Trustee Sage.
Yes.
All right. Go back to your email, refer back to your email, and you can click on the link for the meeting. We'll close out of this one, and we'll see you on the other side. o'clock. We're reconvening. Just came out of our closed session. I will make a note that when we first did roll call, Mr. Craig was not there, but he is now with us. So we will go right now to the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance.
And under nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty and
and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Southgate's mission statement is learning for life. Our vision statement is Southgate Community Schools, the best choice for students and parents. That is going to take us, if you guys could please mute yourselves temporarily. A lot of feedback. All right, we're going to go into our election of officers before we proceed any further in the meeting. So without further ado, I'll now accept nominations for the board president.
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Green.
I'd like to nominate Timothy Estheimer as the board president for the 2021-22 school or 2021 school year.
Thank you. I will accept that nomination. Thank you. Do we have any other nominations for board president? Seeing none, I guess, do we still need to make this official by making the roll call vote?
Yes.
All right. If you could please, Ms. Grahowski, roll call vote that.
Mr. Craig,
Yes.
Mr. Estheimer,
Yes.
Mr. Freitas,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Lamos,
Yes.
Dr. Pomponio,
Yes.
Mr. Sage.
Yes.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Continuing on the elections, we'll now accept nominations for vice president. And I'd like to nominate Mr. Green. Mr. Green, do you accept the nomination?
Yes, Mr. President, I do.
Thank you. Do we have any other nominations for vice president? Seeing none, Ms. Grahowski, will you please roll call that vote?
Mr. Estheimer,
Yes.
Mr. Freitas,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Lamos,
Yes.
Dr. Pomponio,
Yes.
Mr. Sage,
Yes.
Mr. Craig.
Yes.
Thank you. Congratulations, Mr. Green. We'll now accept nominations for our treasurer position. Are there any nominations for treasurer?
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Green.
I would like to nominate Mr. Jason Craig as treasurer for the 2021 school year.
Thank you. Mr. Craig, do you accept the nomination?
Yes, I do. Support.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations for treasurer?
Hey, Rick, you don't have to support it. You're going to be off in a minute. Relax.
Please.
Hearing no other nominations, Ms. Grahowski, will you please roll call vote?
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Lamos,
Yes.
Dr. Pomponio,
Yes.
Mr. Sage,
Yes.
Mr. Craig,
Yes.
Mr. Estheimer,
Yes.
Mr. Freitas.
Yes.
Thank you. Congratulations, Mr. Craig. Thank you for your service, Mr. Lamos. We'll now accept nominations for board secretary. Are there any nominations for board secretary?
Mr. President,
Mr. Green.
I would like to nominate Dr. Darlene Pomponio as board secretary.
Thank you. Dr. Pomponio, do you accept that nomination?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations for board secretary? Seeing none, would you please roll call vote that?
Mr. Freitas,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Lamos,
Yes.
Dr. Pomponio,
Yes.
Mr. Sage,
Yes.
Mr. Craig,
Yes.
Mr. Estheimer.
Yes. All right, that closes out our election of officers. Thank you very much. Congratulations to our current officers. Just to recap, I will remain the board president. Mr. Green remains the vice president. We have a new treasurer in Mr. Craig. We have Dr. Pomponio staying on as our board secretary. Thank you all, and I appreciate your service. It was a tough year in 2020. We kind of need a do-over. All right, we're going to move on to item D, the revisions and approval of the agenda. We all had a chance to look that over, and when you're ready, I will take a motion.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Thank you, Dr. Pomponio. Do we have a second?
Support.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. All right, any discussion? Seeing none. Mr. Houski, you please roll call vote.
Mr. Estheimer,
Yes.
Mr. Frazier,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Lemos,
Yes.
Dr. Pomponio,
Yes.
Mr. Sage,
Yes.
Mr. Craig.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries. We now have an agenda. And I'm going to ask everybody to mute for a minute, except Ms. Irvine. We're going to go to item E, citizens' comments. And if you could turn your microphone off.
Thank you. We do have some citizens' comments today. I am pulling them up on my computer, and Ms. Baker Herring is going to be tracking the time. And I don't believe any of these will exceed 3 minutes. So I think we're fine. If they do, she's going to go ahead and chime in at that point in time. We do have 4 board comments this evening. Our first board comment comes from Rachel West. She's at 15129 Kennebec Street. Good evening. Before you decide if our children should continue learning virtually or return to school face-to-face, let me tell you how they've been doing during this pandemic, since this pandemic started. In March, my daughter was in 3rd grade and my son in preschool. They both absolutely loved school. They would wake up excited to start the day and see their friends and teachers. They got great reports for behavior as well as assignments. Once the pandemic hit, we were all just trying to survive by staying home, waiting out this COVID-19 storm and the less than optimal school situation it caused, and said this is temporary. The only people the kids saw were their grandparents through the window. The kids had a really hard time with this as they missed their friends, peers, teachers, family terribly. Summer came and more was known about this virus. We slowly started seeing close family and friends. Once we knew how low the risks actually were, we allowed our son to play t-ball. Things were looking up, and the kids were looking forward to being able to return to school in the fall as we watched beaches, amusement parks, and other places considered non-essential reopen to the public. When the decision was made to return to school virtually, we chose the Southgate teacher option so that they can at least see their peers and teachers in live sessions. Though the teachers have been great, virtual learning for my children has been very stressful, both mentally and emotionally. We rarely get through a day without some sort of meltdown, whether it be caused by misunderstanding an assignment, headaches from staring at a screen the majority of the day, frustrations from learning to use a computer at 4 or 5 years old, and or not being able to concentrate because their breaks are at different times. They also have a 3-year-old brother who wants to play with his siblings. Have you tried to work from home with kids running around the house? Are the kids distracting? Now imagine being a kid yourself, missing your friends, missing being in school. Throw some technical difficulties and don't forget the fact that kids are better behaved for others versus their moms. It's been really tough. Both kids dread school each day now. I don't have a classroom. I have a kitchen table. This is a house, not a school. My kids are struggling and I feel like I'm failing them every day. Face-to-face learning is essential. When do we stop just trying to survive and start living again? Gyms are open, movie theaters are open, schools need to open. Thank you. Our next comment is from Stephanie Kenzierski, and she is at 28740 Apple Blossom Drive, Flat Rock, Michigan, 48134. I encourage you to delay the return of in-school instruction until teachers have had the opportunity to receive both doses of the vaccine. It's wonderful news that teachers are being added to the vaccine-eligible essential workers list, and I am hopeful that the district will work quickly with state health officials to make the vaccine accessible to staff. While as a social worker and a parent, I fully recognize the strain remote learning has placed on families, I believe it's important to recognize that the health and lives of our teachers have value as well. Community spread is still more than double the previously agreed upon metric. We are so close to the finish line. Let's not risk the health and lives of our teachers, not to mention our most medically vulnerable students unnecessarily. Thank you. Our next comment comes from Mr. Eric Reese at 13159 Commonwealth. Attention, Southgate Community School District Board of Education. I would like to thank the board for their work during this school year. The decisions that you have made were not easy, and hope that you continue to keep the safety of our staff and students as your #1 priority. I would also like to welcome and thank our new superintendent, Sharon Irvine, for your transparency on the proposed continuity of learning plan revision discussions that were held on January 11th, 2021 via Google Meet. As a father of 2 children in Southgate schools and a husband of a staff member, my top concern is their safety. I say that remote learning has not been easy, but the staff we have had at our schools are making sure that our children are getting the proper education, and I cannot thank them enough. At the December 8th, 2020 school board meeting, it was approved that our district would use the Wayne County 14-day trailing average of below 5% to determine a return to in-person schooling. I would like the board to consider a couple factors prior to any vote to change the metrics this board has already approved. 1, many families in our school district have children in multiple schools, and our metrics should be used district-wide and not broken down by building or grade. 2, all staff should be able to receive the full COVID-19 vaccine prior to an in-person learning implementation. 3, any decisions for our learning models should be data-driven for Southgate Community Schools. I would like to thank you for your time and consideration on this matter. Our next is Robert Pulowski at 12575 Chestnut Street, Southgate. If we were to go back in-person classes on January 25th, how would that work out? Would you guys keep the normalcy of letting people go to all of their classes, or would it be their students sitting there in their homerooms and going to all of their classes over video call? How would that play out if we were to return on January 25th? And also, last question, this goes for an in-person or virtual setting, and this question is mostly geared towards Anderson and Davidson mostly. Not much of Beacon or Asher or the elementary schools. What are you guys doing to help students that are not doing so well in their classes to get them motivated and back on track to do the work that's given them and succeed in all their classes to give them a hopeful future to think about? What are you guys doing about that in general? Feel free to contact me back if need be. I left you guys a phone number to contact me when I submitted this comment. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day and a great year. I'm looking forward to the future of the district. Thank you so much and take care. And we will reach out to that individual. Okay.
All set?
Ms. Irvine,
No.
there are 2 more.
Yep, there are 2 more. Yep,
All
I'm
right,
just
go ahead.
getting to those. We have Rob and Tara Secco, and we do not have an address for them. Dear Southgate Board of Education, I wanted to quickly take a moment to say thank you to our teachers. I have seen many disheartening posts floating around social media. Though I will not repeat those posts, many of them revolve around the teachers having the luxury of staying home while many parents do not. I have seen far too many of these posts, and I want to let Southgate teachers know that we see you. We see you show up every day with a smile. We see you working harder than you would if you were in the comfort of your own classroom. We see you responding to your emails into the late night. We see you finding a way to connect with your children through the computer screen. We see your hard work, and we appreciate everything you're doing. I myself am a Southgate graduate. I am proud that our children attend Southgate schools. I am proud of everything that's been done so far to keep our district safe. That being said, I strongly encourage the board to continue remote instruction or remote education. The positivity rate is still above the 9% previously voted on. There is a positive COVID case in our elementary school as we speak. I am elated that the next round of vaccines will be available for teachers, but this vaccine will only protect the teacher themselves. It will not give our children any extra protection against the 25+ students who will now be in a small classroom together. Returning face-to-face will exponentially increase the probability of our students coming in contact with someone who has COVID, whether it be another student or a family member of a fellow student, as the reality is most students have parents who must leave their house for their employment. That is our reality, and there's nothing we can do about that. What we can do is keep the consistency of our children we have right now. They have right now. We have a wonderful teachers who show up every day on a computer screen doing the best they can in not so ideal situation. But at the end of the day, they are safe and healthy, and so are our children. No metric is perfect, but we implore you to keep our children remote. Keep following the Wayne County positivity rates. Keep our children safe. Thank you, Rob and Tara Secco. Okay, I have another as well, and this is from, I'm sorry, Shannon Swager. Dear members of the Board of Education, while it is clear to me that our Return to Learn plan needs to be reaffirmed monthly, and I understand the governor's recommendation that some type of in-person learning is offered by March 1st. What I do not understand is why it's being proposed to revise the metric that was just passed with a 6-1 vote on 12/8/2020 for elementary and middle school students. They have barely given the plan approved from December 8th a chance to be put into motion. And now extreme revisions are being suggested, such that almost doubling the approved metric for elementary and middle school to 9%. That should give us all cause for pause, especially when many stakeholder groups are not given the chance to have input on the said revisions, but instead were informed after the fact. Having a metric for elementary return that is nearly double that of secondary is extremely upsetting. Data for this decision was made in general terms of spread. What is forgotten is that this decision is for a unique group of students that is the needs that we are specific to the developmental nature of elementary students that would add to exposure. Daily events like students losing teeth, sobbing when they have skinned their knees on the blacktop at recess, not having the emotional maturity of how to handle oneself when they fall ill are just a few examples of the exclusive circumstances when noting how revising the metric for this group to 9% should not be an option in the plan. I'm asking you to please keep the metric the same for the entire district at 5%, as was voted on and passed just over 17 school days ago on December 8th. Another concerning consideration in the information of the plan and the FAQ document is that the goal would be 6 feet of social distance, but it states that 3 feet of social distance is acceptable when masks are worn. A lot seems to be riding on in-person numbers being lower to ensure proper social distance. How does one really know without an accurate count, especially since the options for in-person learning have changed since the last family survey? It also seems like families will be asked to decide to a commitment of mode of instruction for their children with much pertinent information missing, such as who the assigned teacher will be for the in-person or remote. While sessions held last night were highly informative, what was also clear as I attended both staff sessions and the one parent session offered is that what remains is a lot of uncertainty on some major key points. This all seems very rushed. All the nuts and bolts that need to be addressed to ensure a safe return for students and staff that is compliant for a 4-day learning plan as a hybrid is no longer an option. It takes time to get right, a lot of time. Events like collecting data from families, revising individual school cult plans, putting new staff in place in elementary, training all staff, all take time. I ask you to please consider the gift of time so that staff and cult teams in the district can get this right, especially considering the planning that will need to take place for the revisions with shifts in leadership at both the central office and building levels. These new administrators need time to lead this initiative effectively in a district that is mostly unfamiliar to them. Thank you for your time. Shannon Swager, proud Titan parent of 3 Ford Line students, Ford Line Elementary Reading Specialist, and PTO staff representative. And that concludes our comments for this evening.
Thank you very much. And thanks to those parents for reaching out to us. We appreciate that. We're going to presentations next, and I will remind you that under action item number 1 tonight, which is our continuity of learning plan, that's where you're going to see an additional presentation on that plan. And that's why we got all these wonderful administrators and teachers in the audience tonight. They're here as members of our COLT team, and they're going to be presenting that to you. So we're going on to item F, presentations. This is the design development presentation with Rob Kukoski.
All right, good evening, everyone.
Right.
Yeah, so today, present to you back, I think it was December 1st, we presented the schematic design presentation for the renovation work that we have planned for the summer of 21. So today is the design development. It's basically the next stage of the design process as we're getting closer here to having the documents finalized to be put out to bid. wanted to present it to you. So a lot of the information that you see will kind of be a repeat, but of what was presented back in early December. But again, it gives you an outline of the overview of the scope of work that'll be done this summer at Grogan and Davidson. So I will present to you guys. And hopefully that is, does that show the presentation for you guys?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. All right, so again, this is the design development update for the renovations for the summer of 21. And today we will look at, again, just a recap of the bond and ballot proposal. We'll do a schedule update on where we're at with that. The design scope of work for Grogan and Davidson, a budget overview, and then any questions and answers that you guys may have. So an overview of the bond and ballot proposal. Again, you'll see this at the beginning of a lot of our presentations. Just to recap where we're at, looking back at the beginning of this bond program for what were some of the key factors, historical facts and goals and objectives. So it's just a reminder for everyone of where we started with the bond and ballot proposal. When we look at a schedule update, the 2021 renovations for Grogan and Davidson, currently TMP is our architect. We do have, I believe, Mark McPartland from TMP is on with us here tonight as well too, in case there's any questions that we have on the design, but they are working hard on the construction documents at this point. The intent is to have the final check construction bid documents completed by January 22nd. They will then distribute those to the team for final review. And then we'll try to get a final bid set issued by January 29th and turned over to Granger Construction that they can package up and put out to bid for the contractors. So really right at the end of January, probably the first week of February, Granger Construction will issue the bid documents to the contractors. We will take receipt of those bids in middle of late February, and then be looking to, after we've gone through the vetting process, all the post-bid interviews, and compiling the GMP amendment, we will present those recommendations to the Board of Education for approval in March. That would then allow us to start issuing contracts and moving forward with procurement of materials, with a potential construction start sometime in May. If there's any work that we can do before school gets out, we would definitely try to get a jump on anything that allows us to do, whether that's field measuring, if there's some areas we can get into and maybe start some preliminary work related to mechanical, anything that we can do ahead of time, because that construction window is short during the summer months. So I would say by May, they'll start seeing some forces on site. And then we will be substantially complete by late August and ready to turn those two buildings back over to you guys for the school year of 21. When we look at the design development scope of work, kind of going through it, and again, pretty much all of this we saw, the scope really hasn't changed. Overall synopsis of the scope hasn't changed from the schematic design. We've been honing in on that scope, but the overall really hasn't changed. So when we look at Grogan, the base bid, we're looking at doing the drive approaches to the front drive at the building that you can see highlighted here in red. The sidewalks that go across those are also deteriorating there. And then the sidewalk in front of the building that wraps around with the curb. If you walk down that side, you'll see big sections of it are starting to spald off and deteriorate there. So we'd be looking to replace those sidewalks in front of the building. And then right at the in front of the main entry, there's some pretty deteriorated concrete that we'd look to patch up. So this is a big part of the remaining concrete work out there that really needs to be replaced. So looking at getting all that included in this first package. When we look at the element, the architectural scope of work, the main focus for these schools was the corridor doors, the classroom doors, replacing those for security purposes, renovating the student and the staff toilet rooms, replacing the classroom flooring, patching and painting the soffits in the west wing classrooms. Each of those classrooms kind of have a soffit at the back that has a lot of old paint and damage done to it. So one of the things was to patch and paint those areas in those classrooms, and then replacing the hardware on the egress windows in each of the classrooms to comply with emergency egress requirements. And then on the exterior of the building, the EFIS panels that you see on the exterior around the cafeteria, looking to patch and recoat that that you'll see from the exterior. So when we look at an overview map of it, all the blue circles show all the classroom doors that would be replaced throughout the building. The red areas are the big, larger gang bathrooms that are used. The red ones are getting a full gut and replacement, floor tile, wall tile, fixtures, everything, a complete gut in those larger gang bathrooms. And the light blue that you see is the smaller individual staff bathrooms throughout the buildings. Those are getting more of a finishes upgrade. So new lighting, new painting, new fixtures in some of them that have older fixtures in them. Some of them do have newer fixtures that we would leave. So we've gone through each of these multiple times now and kind of looked specifically at what needs to be replaced to bring those up. So any of the light blue ones are getting the facelift renovation finish upgrades to bring those up on par with all the bathrooms around the district. And then these wings here, the tan, you can see the soffits at the back of the rooms that would be painted in those classrooms. And then around the cafeteria on the exterior, there's the EFIS coating on the building that will be patched and recoated. If you drive by there, take a look at it, you can see it's pretty worn and weathered. So we would patch and repaint that. When you look at the flooring, basically all the classrooms are getting new LVT flooring throughout. The old carpet will be replaced and a new LVT flooring will be installed. And then the light blue is the large gang bathrooms that are getting new ceramic tile for the floors. So this drawing illustrates which areas will be getting new flooring throughout the building. Then when we look at the mechanical and electrical scope of work, base bid wise, we're looking at renovating the student and staff toilet rooms, replacing the air handler units for the cafeteria, replacing the boiler and the associated piping in the boiler room, replacing the domestic water heater, replacing the cabinet unit heaters at the entries to the building, replacing select exhaust fans throughout the building, upgrading the classroom lighting and electrical panels, replacing select electrical panels that are older or having any issues. So that would be the base bid scope of work. And then we have identified one alternate for the rooftop unit for the gymnasium as a little bit of bid protection. If we come in over budget and something we need to look at would be the rooftop gymnasium. We'll have a separate price so we can identify the cost specifically for that unit. So we've identified that as an alternate. When we look at a floor plan then for that scope of work, all the yellow that you see are the rooms that would get classroom lighting upgrades. The dark blue is the mechanical equipment that would get replaced. So you have a new boiler in the mechanical room. The other boiler was replaced in the last bond program. And then here, the piping in that boiler room, actually, a lot of it needs to be replaced and repiped. So that is included in there. The domestic hot water heater is being replaced. At the entries here to these doors, there's cabinet unit heaters that would be replaced for heating. You have the new rooftop for the cafeteria, and then the lighter blue noted here is the alternate for the rooftop unit for the gymnasium. When we go over to the architectural scope of work for Davidson Middle School, right now in Series 1, the main focus of the work was security for the classroom doors and then renovating the bathrooms, as those were two main priorities to be replaced here in Series 1. Davidson will get quite a bit more work in Series 2 of the bond program, but Series 1, we have the classroom doors being replaced and then renovating the student and staff toilet rooms. And then we're going to have an alternate again as well for this building for additional corridor doors. The initial plan was just to do some classroom doors or do the classroom doors throughout the building, but as you're going through that space, there's some additional doors to other areas that also need to be replaced. So we're looking at identifying a lot of those as alternates and kind of walking through that so we know what that cost would be if we need it for at bid time. So looking at an overall map, the blue dots throughout that you see are all the doors highlighted to be identified to be replaced for each of the classrooms. Again, the red bathrooms are the full gut and replacement of everything in there. So all the 4 main gang bathrooms in that building. And then the lighter blue that you see is the smaller staff bathrooms, individual bathrooms that would get more of a facelift renovation with new painting, new lighting, new partitions, things like that, just not full gut and replacement. So this drawing kind of illustrates the areas of work that'll be done in 2021. When we look at the floor patterns for the classrooms, we had gotten multiple options for different floor types and patterns, and this was ultimately the what was selected. There'll be 3 different types of LVT that will be put together in a pattern. So you got your 3 different colors. This gives you a large overview to kind of show the pattern, and then a close-up of the 3 different colors. So this will kind of be the flooring standard for the classrooms at Grogan. When we look at the Davidson and Grogan bathrooms, the floor tiles different, again, 3 different colors and a mosaic pattern laid out on the floor. And then for the walls, we'll have a white tile on the wall with a red stripe across there. And if you've been in Anderson's bathroom at the main entrance, the design's kind of tailored around that bathroom that was done a couple years ago at the end of the last bond program. So that's kind of used as the template for the bathroom renovations at each of the buildings. So when we look at the budget then overview for where we're at right now, this chart shows us our bond budget for each of the schools. Grogan, we were at 1.36 million. Davidson, 616,000. So we're just under $2 million for these 2 schools. At our SD estimate, and again, SD was, drawings were 25, 30% complete, a lot of write-ups, not necessarily a lot of details to the scope of work. Our estimates from Granger Construction were total 2.7 million for that scope of work. As we've started to refine that work, their DD estimate, which was done now, it's a couple weeks old at this point. They did it back here earlier in January. So at that point, they're at 2.4 million. So we were still looking at about 400,000 over on the estimate for those 2 schools. Since then, we have been working to come up with additional cost savings and identifying alternates, which we kind of reviewed in the at each of the scopes, but we've really gone through and started to identify, all right, what else can we do without substantially changing the scope of work? What changes can we make and what can we do to that? So with that, we have identified $208,000 worth of work for those items. And then I also wanted to note, right now we are carrying a 10% design contingency that is included in the DD estimate. So there's about $218,000 in a design contingency right now. So as we're honing in on that, we're getting down closer to our budget to where we feel more comfortable, and with the additional cost savings that we've been working through, the alternates and the contingency, the team definitely feels a lot more comfortable on where we're at. And over the course of the next 2 weeks, as we're finalizing that, we're still trying to identify items and continue to work on that. So the hope is we will be at or under budget on bid day. We've already started to solicit contractors, developing the bid list of who we'd reach out to for bidding. So Granger's already starting to reach out to those contractors and put that list together and draw some interest for this project. So that'll be our biggest savings that we can get, is getting good participation at bid time for this. So we are striving hard for that and working to improve this as much as we can. So with that kind of gives a quick summary of where we're at with the schedule, the scope of work, and the budget. At this point, I'll turn it over for any questions that you guys may have.
Thank you very much, Rob. Does anybody have any specific questions regarding this plan? If not, I do. Rick does have something that he had sent previously. I sent me an email, so I wanted him to get in the front of the line.
Oh, no, that was different. The one I wanted to ask right now, Rob, excuse me, is it a bad time to solicit bids now because there won't be much participation, or is that a potential issue with us?
No, I think we're still at a good time. You know, it's always a crapshoot. You could miss it by a day, you could miss it by a week. You never know. We try to look at what else is being bid. You know, when we do put that out, we look at what other projects we have going on. We have bid calendars that list everything that's going on. Granger does the same thing to see what they do. So we try to hit the market in between. You don't want to be bidding something when you know there's 3 other large programs out there. So if you can move things a couple days or a week, you know, we do that as well. But the overall timing, I think we're still good for this, you know, upcoming summer's work and getting good participation. So
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, that's the hope. We're already starting to drill the phone lines, and Granger's been already starting to reach out to people to drum up that interest on there. So again, I bid a project back in December that we thought, you know, early December, and we thought that was perfect before the holidays, before the big rush, and come to find out there was like 4 other projects at the same time bidding. And then if we'd waited till 2 weeks later, we probably would have hit that window just perfect. So you try to get as many feelers out there and see what else is out there and time it accordingly with that. So we are trying to do that. That's why we haven't locked in a specific date just yet either, that we're going to be out on this date or have bids due on this date. We're still looking through that information.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I just got one, and it's
Yeah, Mr. Sage.
With the upgrades with the lighting and the HVAC units and so on and so forth, with the rebates from DTE or the gas companies, do you submit those in? Do those go back to the contractor? Do those go to the school? Where does that go?
Yeah, they would go back to the school. We work with the contractors and the firms to gather that information and work with the district to get those submitted, and they'd come back to the district. So it's usually a team effort pulling that together. A lot of times we get the commissioning agents that'll be involved to help pull that together along with the contractors. So that'll come back to the district.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions about this presentation? I see none. Mr. Lamas, you initially had a question that you had emailed that Mr. Irvine thought perhaps Mr. Hanson or Mr. Kukowski might be able to help you with it.
Yeah, that's coming later on in the robotics action item.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I thought maybe I forgot something, but yeah, it's for later on about the Fanuc stuff.
Okay, no problem. I didn't know if they were sticking around. Perfect. Thank you. All right. If we have no other questions, I don't see any other hands up. We'll move on. We're going to do item G, the consent agenda. It consists of 4 items, and there's a lot of items from the minutes, for prior board meetings, our HR update, disbursements for December, some operational organizational items. Is there anybody who would be prepared to make that motion?
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you so much. And do we have a second on that?
Support.
Supported by Mr. Lamas. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Seeing none, would you please, Ms. Grahowski, would you please roll call vote?
Mr. Ustheimer,
Yes.
Mr. Freitas,
Yes.
Mr. Green. Mr. Green,
Yes, I had to hit the button. Hold on.
Mr. Ramos,
Yes.
Dr. Pomponio,
Yes.
Mr. Sage,
Yes.
Mr. Craig.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Motion passes. All right. So that moves us on to the first action item, number
President
H.
I just wanted to jump in and say, you know, with the approval of the consent agenda items, we do now have a new administrator at Ford Line Elementary, and he is on today. Mr. Lindsay, I know that you are present on this meeting, and I just want to make sure that I introduce him. We're excited to have him. He was at Van Buren Schools as a middle school administrator, and we're excited about him joining Ford Line today.
Welcome aboard.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I was going to mention that. We're going to go to action item number 1. We'll go to action item number 1. This is the Southgate Community School District's mode of instruction, our metric revision. As you know, each month the Board of Education must reconfirm the delivery of instruction for the 2020 to 2021 school year. In December, the Board of Education approved fully remote instruction through Friday, January 22nd. It also approved a metric for returning to school using a rolling 14-day average of a Wayne County positivity rate of 5% or less as listed on the COVID Act Now website. The revised January recommendation is presented at this board meeting. If you've had a chance to look that over, is there any, Ms. Irvine, I'll turn it over to you for the presentation.
Yes. Let's see. Yeah, you can hear me good. I do have a presentation that I'd like to share just so that we kind of get a chance to speak in this forum regarding the plan itself. We did do quite a bit of work, and I'm going to share this with you now.
Ms. Irvine, can I just interrupt for 1 second?
Yep.
I'm going to, Andy and I were talking ahead of the meeting, and I'm going to take something out of the playbook of some of the other schools that we've kind of peeked in on this.
Okay.
When you're done with the presentation for the Q&As, I'll sort of go around the room rather than me try to scramble and see all the hands up and everything. I'll call on, I'll start with the trustees and go up from there. I'll call on people individually one at a time. If you're prepared to ask a question, if you're not, we can always skip and come back to you. But it sort of will help me kind of keep control, knowing whose hands are up, and it gets a little crazy. So I just wanted to let the board members know that. So as they're listening to this, if they have any questions, they can kind of frame that ahead of time. Thank you.
Great. I just want to confirm that you're able to see the slide that is in front of you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. So this is the continuity of learning plan revision that's being proposed to the Board of Education at this time for consideration. And as was mentioned in several of the comments, citizen comments today, this is something that I have had a chance to talk with some staff groups, and there was an ad hoc kind of impromptu virtual meeting that I held with parents who were kind of aware of it at the time, and do recognize that it did not capture all of the parents in terms of the ability to provide information. And certainly as this rolls out and things, we make decisions in the future, we will certainly make sure that every parent, if we have a virtual meeting, is included or has the option to be included. I will be the first to say this is not a new superintendent's typical first meeting and first agenda item. And so I appreciate all the flexibility and support that I've received from so many people in terms of moving through this very quickly. It does feel quick, and it is certainly a very quick turnaround on a plan. And I will say it does reflect my addition to the COLT team, because for those that may know, my prior role with Brighton area schools, my job was to implement in-person learning. And although I didn't make the decision to go back in person, and that was determined by the Board of Education and superintendent in that district, my responsibility was to make sure that it was done in a safe way. So there is a lot of firsthand information that I have that has contributed to what, again, feels like a level of urgency in some ways, and a level of acceleration, certainly. First of all, the mode of instruction that was confirmed in December, as you had mentioned, we are required monthly to revisit this. And it does make us all feel a little schizophrenic to continually be talking about what our plan for 2021 is, when really we're making a plan for the month and taking in all the data that we know at that time. And the reason for that, the legislature did not want schools to entrench themselves in a mode of operation without ever revisiting the data that's available. So they did not want school districts to just choose remote and stay remote all year if data provided that otherwise, or to choose in person and just ignore any data that's coming in that's saying that that may be unsafe. So that is a requirement that we have. In December, the existing continuity of learning plan was reviewed and approved December 8th, as was mentioned in citizen comment as well. And the board made two motions at the time. One was to approve a metric and one was to stay remote until January 22nd. The metric at that time was a 14-day rolling average of the Wayne County positivity rate below 5% using the website COVID Act Now and the district's 14-day average tracking. Now, the metric was approved, and then at the next agenda item, the board chose to be remote until January 22nd. So I'm sure you understand that there are some in the community that believed that that meant that starting January 25th, we'd be back in school. And then there were many others in the community that believed that we wouldn't return back to school until this metric is met. So because January 22nd, this is the only board meeting that we're able to address the mode of operation prior to January 25th, this is the reason why it's coming up on my very first meeting with all of you. So again, I apologize for the urgency and the speed at which all of this is kind of tumbling out. And so one of the things that did strike me and some of the attention that there is, the positivity rate for COVID Act Now, for those that have been monitoring it, know that each number that's reflected within that metric or that graph is actually 7 days, a 7-day average. So it is not simply a positivity rate for a certain day. It describes the positivity rate for the prior 7 days. So when the district decides to go ahead and track 14-day average of that, by the 14th day, they are actually considering 21 days of positivity rate rather than 14. 14 days is the recommended period of time for assessing risk. And so one of the recommendations that I did have coming in was to adjust that to the COLT team. We talked about it, and as a COLT team, we're all very interested in seeing kids get back to a learning environment as soon as we can, an in-person option. We understand, the academic benefits that come from that. We also are about to collect all of the NWEA data for the half of the year that we've been in place, and that's going to be collected and reported out to the board very soon. So we know that there are going to be some factors that we have to consider. So one of the first was, if we are truly targeting 14 days rather than 21 days, then we would adjust that metric to track 7 days of the COVID Act Now number. And then on the 7th day, that does give us 14 days of whatever our target is, whatever that may be. So that's one recommendation to the revision that we have. Here is, I think we jumped ahead. Anyhow, we can go ahead and talk using this form here, or this particular slide. A metric. We have two possible metrics, and I do see that it's a little bit harder. I apologize. Let me see how we get through this. There we go. Okay, metric recommendation. If we were to look, I just want to show you right now what our COVID Act Now positivity rate is. So from beginning in January, we had 11.60 as our January 1st. It went to 12.2 to 12.3, 12.3, 12.6, 12.6, 11.7, 11.2, 10.8, 10.6.
Sure.
So it is, yes.
Are you able to share the screen again?
Oh, is it not sharing? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Oh, thank you. I was not aware. I'm busy on my side, sharing lots of really important things. Here we go. Not noticing that.
There we go.
Okay. We good?
Yep.
Okay, great. So students would return to person under this revision when Wayne County positivity rate is at or below the targeted rate for 7 consecutive days. And as I was mentioning, these are the rates that we are experiencing at this time in Wayne County. COVID Act now does not distinguish Detroit out of that. So I do believe Detroit is included. When we deal with Wayne RESA numbers, they actually exclude Detroit. So the proposed metric would be that if we achieve this metric at least 5 days before January 25th, school would start on January 25th. Otherwise, school would start on the Monday that is at least 5 days from achieving the metric. So I think there was a lot of worry about what does it actually mean? How much time would we have to kind of watch that and start that and finalize those arrangements? And there was some confusion, I think, early on with the plan in terms of what does it mean when we're talking about the later of the two. It just meant that we're not starting before January 25th, even if the metric was achieved. But if it's achieved at least 5 days before, we'd start on January 25th. Otherwise, again, the school would start on the Monday that is at least 5 days from achieving the metric. Okay, this is not as easy to see because these are in black here, and I don't believe that I can make that adjustment on the fly. So I'm going to jump back out again, just very quickly. I know I'm not sharing now, but there we go. I'm going to jump back in. I apologize. Okay, we'll try that one more time. Okay, these might be harder to read at this point. I understand that. However, we do have a positivity rate. If you look at Southgate, in January, on January 1st, we had an 8% positivity rate, a 7.5 on January 2nd. It went 7.64, 7.86, 7.79, 8.86, 8.29, 8.36, down to 7.93, 8.21. And today we are at 8.29. If you compare that to Riverview, we have Riverview's at 2.93, 3 with 3, 2.7. And so you can see that it gradually has risen, but Riverview is at 3.93. Allen Park currently is at 7.36. Wyandotte is at 5.07. Trenton is at 5.79. And Woodhaven is at 3.07. Now, this metric is available on the website right now. If you scroll through the notice, the information that I provided to parents, when it says the school districts, the CSD's tracking is here, that's where you'll find this metric a little more legible. So I encourage anyone who's watching this on YouTube to go ahead and access that on their computer, and you will find this metric in a more legible way there. So there is a consideration that we can have in terms of which metric we look at, whether it's Southgate specific or Wayne County. The recommendation we have right now is for Wayne County. And discussion with the board, here at the end, we certainly can reconsider that. Metric for staying in school. Once we commit, it is really important that our families have the chance to stay in person without bouncing back and forth. We've seen how these numbers can flow. That doesn't mean that we won't have moments where we bring this back to the board and say, this, for instance, if a new strain of COVID-19 comes out that is demonstrating more contagion, we can have that meeting and stop that and switch to remote schooling. It does not mean that we wouldn't. It just means it may not automatically happen, because if you hit your metric and then kind of dance right above and then go back down below, that uncertainty and unpredictability for a school setting is really difficult to manage. So Wayne County has released a rubric that does share what circumstances may prompt a school to make a decision, a locally based decision based on the school associated cases in their school at that time. So instead of relying on a county metric, which may or may not really accurately describe what's happening in the school system itself, we would look very closely at our own cases, our own school associated cases, and this is a rubric that they provided for making that decision. I know it's not easy to read this in the presentation. It is available also on the website if you'd like to look at that more closely. I think it's important to talk about what school districts who have been in person have experienced. So if there is a positive case in the school district has to work with their local county, their local health department to make a decision on who is quarantined because of that positive case. And that's true for positive or probable. And people may know that a probable case is a case of someone who is experiencing symptoms who has also been in contact with a positive case. They call that probable. They don't even require testing in some cases for that. What would happen though if we had a positive case? In elementary classes, that entire class would switch to remote learning for the quarantine period. So even if you are in person and the district doesn't necessarily choose a metric for staying in person that automatically moves them in and out of it, you still can have the experience of moving in and out of it. I think that's an important thing for parents to realize, that a positive case will require the school district to respond, to switch to remote learning for the quarantine period. Middle school and high school are contact traced. So it will depend. The health department really just takes a kind of a 6-foot tape measure and draws kind of a circle around that positive case and says who was in that space for 15 minutes or more cumulatively for a 24-hour period. And those individuals are shifted to quarantine. So fortunately, the plan that we have now for middle school and high school does allow students to participate remotely or in person and get the same material at the same pace, so that will not have the same impact on middle school and high school as it may in school districts that did not have that. So that's just something to be aware of. And of course, we would work very closely with the Wayne County Health Department for this. So what is the target we're suggesting? The plan itself has a target that differentiates between elementary and middle school and high school. So we would look at a Wayne County positivity rate at or below 9% for elementary or middle school, and a 5% for high school. And the questions, I'm sure, are why would we do that? If you do get on the website and you look through the letter that's there, you can find research, a link to research that supports that younger students are showing lower transmission levels than older students. The other thing about elementary and middle school environments is that they're more carefully supervised for the enforcement of safety protocols. So high school environments, when things like closed campus or an open campus for lunch, or other scenarios in high school that don't carry as much supervision as the middle school. And in our particular plan, we actually have students cohorted so that teachers are traveling to students from room to room. Our middle school students wouldn't be moving from room to room for their classes. So that's a really important piece of information about why we would consider elementary and middle school environments to be more heavily controlled. And obviously elementary, middle school, we do have fewer extracurricular activities that are happening. High school, we do think, obviously the research says that the older students their spread potential, their transmission potential is more comparable to adults. There are also a lot of other extracurricular activities in which high schoolers are interacting with each other. So we are making a recommendation that positivity rate impact what pace we return students. We do see that has been the case in other school districts where they have brought back elementary first And you even see that when Governor Whitmer closed down high schools, she kept elementary and middle schools open. So I think that that is noteworthy when we look at how the state and the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services looks at the difference between levels. Now, what you have here is a definite return into in-person schooling regardless of the metric by March 1st, 2021. So if we haven't achieved that metric, we would be in place regardless of the metric on March 1st. Now, we did originally have a vaccination alternative, but I think, the citizen comment that really talked about the scope of vaccinations, if we are going to use a vaccination metric that could feasibly get us there before March 1st, it would have to consider all stages of that vaccination. So the original plan did consider the first phase, the first shot, between the first shot and the second shot, but didn't consider anything past the second shot. And I really felt like there was a lot of very good information coming from parents that said, look, if you're going to consider that, you need to go through that entire cycle. And because that entire cycle would not bring us back before March 1st, it really does stop being a meaningful metric to use. There wouldn't be an intervening opportunity for a quicker return than the positivity rate that we'd established. Mode of instruction. Before the metrics are achieved, the mode of instruction would be remote or virtual. Once the metrics are achieved, the mode of instruction would be in-person, remote, or virtual. Now, this is a difference. Rather than going with the 50% hybrid, we are recommending that kids are in school 4 days a week. All of the students who choose to be in person Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, with remote asynchronous or synchronous Wednesdays. And the shift in that thinking had to do with the natural social distancing options or opportunities that happen once you have moved your students that are going to stay remote and in virtual out of the numbers, then you will end up with a lower class size already. So is it necessary for us to further reduce that? And for many families, the hybrid option is not a realistic alternative to remote for them because of their own personal family situations. And I know that that's something that even Allen Park right now is wrestling with, is the strong pushback on hybrid situations there as well. In November, we did receive information from our families that said they expect about 65% of the families to return to in-person. And that means that we're looking at about roughly a 65% classroom load or class size in those. Remote elementary would be with a separate remote teacher. And that is something that's different than the plan was originally, because elementary students, they will travel through curriculum very quickly in an in-person environment, more so than their remote environment. And so you're going to get very quickly a pace differential on curriculum that's going to happen. It's also, as difficult it is for kids to be in front of screens, it is very difficult for the developmental appropriateness of students to watch what's happening in a classroom when they're not included. It's just really a difficult thing altogether. So we are adding, and this will give us options for our elementary teachers who need to be fully remote, the opportunity to be remote. But again, middle school and high school would have the opportunity to live stream into an in-person class. And virtual will stay Atlas. And for all of those who were concerned initially about whether or not Atlas teachers would stay in Atlas, they will stay in Atlas. That is not something that a new teacher can pick up very easily, especially given the unique requirements of Florida virtual curriculum. So transitioning, we did, talk about what does the transition mean for going from remote to being in person. And that first week we need to have at least that first week an AM half days for Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday for it. And that gives, families a chance or kids a chance to get used to wearing a mask, students or teachers a chance to experience teaching in a mask. And those afternoons would be asynchronous. We wouldn't have the students going back for live instruction that afternoon. And now we didn't have one plan for high school. That does not mean we can't consider a transition like that for high school, something like a 50% AB hybrid for returning that first day. That's a possibility, or for that first week, excuse me. So that is something we can consider as more of a gradual. And I realize by gradual that's probably not the gradual that much of the feedback regarding AB meant, but that is a possibility. What does elementary in person look like? All students would be required to wear masks. Shields would not be considered an option. Students would receive music, art, PE, as well as special education services according to their IEP, and literacy support is needed. Start and end times would be 8:10 to 2:35. Now, originally, there was a question posed in the sessions we had yesterday about what the report times were, and I had said that they would be their regularly scheduled times. But I do understand that the teachers had already or the previous plans had already built some extra collaborative time. And I will say that especially for those that are doing a concurrent hybrid model, that's really important. It'll be important also to give that space because our computer teachers right now are teaching Atlas. So we will not have them available for specials instruction for our students in person. So that is an adjustment to what we had said yesterday. Students would stay in cohorts through the day. Again, elementary students wouldn't be guaranteed their current teacher for in-person or remote instruction. So it may be that their teacher is going to be the remote teacher and they happen to be going remote so that they actually have their own teacher. That may happen. Or, they're going in person and their teacher is going in person. So that may happen. The question came up about decisions on a case-by-case basis about whether or not a student should stay with one teacher or another. And just like any class assignment, that's something that'll be worked out with the principal and the team that's there at the building to know if that's an important commitment to make. Elementary class sizes are expected to be between 15 and 20. There were some questions about lunches that came in, and lunches would be a pre-packaged. There would not be a lunch line. This is regardless of the level they're in. It's pre-packaged. There are assigned seating in the lunch spaces. Lunch spaces are spread out to allow for some social distancing to happen as well. Middle school, what does it look like? Students are required to wear masks again. Shields are not an option. If we have students that have problems wearing masks, we will have to assign them to the remote status. Students will be in cohorts. Teachers travel from room to room. Students do not. Lunch environment expanded to allow for spacing and lunch cohorts, prepackaged grab-and-go meals, assigned seating. Start times would be 7:50 to 1:57. Middle school class sizes are expected to be between 18 and 25. High school in person, again, all masks, same issue with the shields. Start and end time, 7:40 to 1:52. Students would not be permitted, again, to go off campus at lunch. One of the big reasons is that we will need to enforce our safety protocols, and we can't have students piling into cars together to go off campus for lunch. So we would have to expand lunch areas as much as possible, prepackaged meals, assigned seating. High school class sizes are expected to be between 18 and 25. And that class size really depends on the subject area. You don't have a band class that is going to have that. But we also have a much larger band space available. So it depends on the subject matter and at the high school level, what that classroom can accommodate. When we get the commitment levels from families, we would go through and assess each room to decide how many we can actually get and be socially distant. Now, socially distance means that according to the roadmap, it is 3 to 6 feet, does not mean that we think that 3 feet is acceptable. It means that there will be times when kids become in 3 feet from each other, but that's not where we would position our desks. We would probably aim for something very close to 4.5, closer to 6 if we can get them there. But the new roadmap does say that schools are, they're permitted to have 3 feet of distance with a mask, but they will need to have mitigating factors involved in that. So there's going to be some problem solving that will have to take place at the high school level, especially in all levels, once we see the in-person numbers. It could be that we don't have the space for 90% of our kids to return and keep social distance. So if that happens, we may have to consider an A/B hybrid if that's the case, or something else that varies that problem solves with that. We will likely have some form of cap for each room of the number of students that a space can accommodate. This is one of those moments in which the fact that we're not using the full capacity of the high school is an advantage to us. We will have many more spaces to consider spreading into. Staffing increases, I talked about the fact that we'll be adding staff to the elementary level. We would be adding medical assistants. We will have remote assignments for anyone who produces work restrictions that will require them and evaluate them according to ADA regulations. We also have the option to increase our FFCRA, that is the protection for sick time in the event that staff are required to quarantine, for instance. Now, if a staff member quarantines in the high school or middle school level, they will just be switched to remote and teach remotely into that unless they are actually not able to do so. But that would be the default for those sections and those levels. Again, FFCRA, we're extending it. We don't get the tax benefit that was available to us in the fall. Public entities do not. But we would continue to honor that protection for leave. So we will have a parent commitment window that would come up under this plan, which would be Thursday, January 14th. Deadline for this commitment would be Monday, January 18th. We, at that time, will allow Atlas students to move from Atlas to remote or in person. And we also have to understand, though, that elementary students, because you're going to be in different classes altogether with different teachers, that won't necessarily be available once that commitment's made. In middle school and high school, it will very much depend case by case about the space that's available in the rooms that we've decided it has space limits. So it would depend on space on that. So we did have some frequently asked questions, and we asked for people to give feedback. I know that's different than polling our parents in advance. Because of the timing of our meeting together today, we weren't able to do this as an early commitment level or a survey to get everyone's input on what they would choose without this being introduced to you. So we did ask for feedback on it and have made some adjustments based on that feedback. We had questions that were submitted, and so those questions are available to individuals who want to take a look at that. Feedback information showed that 68.5% wanted a metric considering COVID-19 positivity, but 53% wanted a hard return date at some point. 42% of those wanted a January 25th. And the other was looking at March 1st. About 50% thought that we should separate out our middle school and elementary from our high school, or had two different metrics for that. About 50% of those thought middle school should go with high school, and 50% thought it should go with elementary school. So we definitely have a community that is not going to allow surveys to be a primary source of decision making because there isn't as much clarity that comes from those. We had a lot of great feedback from staff and parents that were offered in that response form. All of that I want to reassure to those that took the time to add feedback there. All of that was shared with the Board of Education. So that's the presentation at this time. And so I'll open it up for questions and next steps in consideration of this revision.
Thank you for that presentation. So this point is where I'll just kind of go around robin here. We'll start with questions with staff. Let's start with Mr. Freitas.
I had a comment about the positivity rate. We have 39% of our students are school of choice. We have to keep that in mind when we use that metric. A lot of our students don't come from just Southgate. But with that in mind, Riverview has a larger percentage of students who are school of choice too, and they've kept their COVID numbers down. One of my questions was about the start time for the elementary and the high school. When the parents say that their kids are getting out early, that is for the staff to continually to work to come up with more engaging lessons, to really try to get all the issues worked out.
Yeah, the way it was described is when a teacher, especially at the middle school and high school level, is teaching both remotely and in person, they spend their time predominantly supporting the in-person members of that team or that group. And then once those in-person students leave, they have a whole body of remote students that may need more time and may need more support. And so those extra 40 minutes have been carved in for that. And that was part of the original plan that came forward to the board in November.
And it won't affect our state hours,
No.
1,008 hours. Yeah, okay.
Nope. Our obligation to the state is to make sure that we have 100 days of instruction, what we would have covered within 100 days of instruction. So the curriculum requirements are there for what we would have covered for a typical year, but they are not calculating the actual minutes. And pupil accounting is relying on two-way interactions to count the student during those count periods.
Okay, that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Friedrich. I did have Mr. Sage next, but I know he was having some connectivity issues. Sean, are you with us right now? Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah. So apologize. I lost the connection twice in that series, so I can only see the frustration what these kids are going through and the teachers are going through. Because I'm switching from my phone to my computer, so I apologize if I missed something. As far as, and I don't know if I missed this, if somebody else asked this about the metric locally with Wayne County versus the local downriver area, is that up for discussion, or is that set in stone? Where are we at with that?
So there are some really key points on this that can be adjusted by the board. So we've made an attempt to find something that can work for as many people as possible, but unfortunately this isn't a binary option. This isn't a binary issue. This is a binary issue. This is a hard one to find compromise, because when you find compromise now, everybody's angry. Everyone's frustrated because no one's getting exactly what they want. However, absolutely, there is opportunity for some key points to be adjusted. And when we get to the motion, rather than accepting the plan as presented, we're accepting the plan as adjusted.
Okay, thank you. And then as far as when we're looking at the current plan, at this point, so when we had the vote in August per se, and then the metric was out, and I know there was a question posed by one of the parents out there about, why is it changing after 1 month? And listen, I understand, but it continues to change. I mean, in every business and everything, it's changing month to month to month. Depending on if we're going with a metric, whether we're going to Wayne County, whether we're going locally with the downriver area schools, with our cities, there hasn't been a choice. So there's been a choice to go Atlas. There's been a choice to go remote, which are still both there. The one choice that the parents haven't been able to have is to be in person. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, that has not been available.
So that's been the only thing that's been off the table. Everything's been there for as far as choices.
Yep.
And I look at it that way, but then I also want to look at the safety of the students and the teachers. So I cut out right when you started talking about the vaccines, and I apologize for that.
Okay.
As far as the vaccine, looking out for the best interest of the teachers and make sure everybody's safe. Do we have they came out with from Wayne County with when these will be available exactly?
The timing for the information, they asked for information about how many of our teachers or educators, I'll say educators, it's not just teachers, are work with students and are willing to take or have the vaccine. And they wanted these numbers to anticipate how much they would need to set aside for us. That information is due tomorrow, has been submitted. We did get that information from people last week. So I can only guess that we're definitely not on the January 11th track because they just are getting the information now. It's my understanding that the health department was rather shocked by an announcement that the window of availability would open January 11th because they don't feel like they've gotten through those in 1A yet, much less getting to 1B. So in terms of timing, we don't have any idea right now when that's going to be scheduled or when Southgate teachers are going to have that available. I know that there have been teachers who've managed to secure an appointment. So through a different county or through some other means, but in terms of how it's going to roll out with school districts apart from independently, seeking it out, that hasn't been unveiled yet.
Okay. Yeah, I see it where with the option, looking at the percentages that are on the graphs that I received earlier that I didn't get cut out here, was that it's a split bag. So there's choices out there. The question is, with the teachers that have to come back to work, we just want them as safe as possible.
Yeah. So what I would say to that is it is in the teachers' decision-making power. They do have the control of their classroom, and they can be 6 feet from students, and they can wear a mask and a shield, and we will have something available for them to stand behind if they need to. We'll do whatever we can to allow them to control their environment in a way that protects them. Now, that's not always going to be the case for elementary in terms of static, the ability to stay static, because young children need to be cared for. And there are some very real attention that has to be paid to young students, but shields and masks are available for that. And we're talking about 15 minutes cumulative over a 24-hour period. And again, teachers have a lot of control about monitoring how that happens and paying attention to that. In my experience in Brighton, in middle school and high school, we had 80 associated cases by December, about the time we broke for winter break. So by a school associated cases, meaning that there was a positive case on the property during school activities. Over all of those cases, only 2 of them had what they consider to be a student-to-student transmission or an outbreak. So an outbreak is a transmission that happens in the school environment. So 78 of them were actually they contracted it in a home environment. They showed up at school with it. We did our contact tracing. We quarantined accordingly, and none of the other kids that we quarantined came down with symptoms. That's 78 cases of that versus 2. One of the other, important things to consider too is that in middle school and high school, once we reinforced that, teachers weren't even quarantined in these cases. When we did the contact tracing, we didn't even have to actually quarantine the teacher because we weren't with anywhere near that individual for 15 minutes or more. So that I think that's a really significant statistic when you think about, or experience when you think about the control that teachers can have. Now, we also know that there's going to be immunocompromised individuals, and they're going to produce work restrictions,
Right.
and we're going to honor them.
Right.
Anyone who is vulnerable, we're going to honor that. How do we do that? We have had situations where the teacher clocks in, logs in at 7:50 or 7:40 and starts teaching their class. That's the kids are there, and we have another attendant in the class who is the hands of that teacher, because that teacher is not able to be present because they cannot be exposed for that reason. So there are lots of ways we can consider how we enable everyone who produces the doctor's documentation that really makes that a threat, an opportunity to stay out of the school environment.
Okay. And then just last question. So like with my work, close contact from the CDC is within 6 feet with no mask for 15 minutes. Are we going
Yeah.
with the same guidelines?
Right. Well, I will say that the health department did not want to get into the weeds with the situation and decide if the mask was worn properly. So the health department said whether they have a mask or not, if they were within 6 feet, then we're still going to be cautionary. We're going to be careful, and we're going to make sure that they're quarantined. But you're right, it's 6 feet without a mask is the real recommendation. But again, schools were much more conservative, and they just said, we don't know if the kid was wearing the mask the right way.
Okay.
And so we're just going to assume they weren't, and we're just going to go ahead and quarantine anyhow.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thanks, Mr. Sage. Next up, we have Mr. Lamas.
I have just one question. Do we have the proper equipment, PPE equipment, masks, and everything else we're going to need to get us through whatever, a month, or what's our supply look like, if you know that offhand?
I don't know that offhand. Jacob may be able to tell us a little bit of the purchasing that happened. I know that I know Jill worked very hard on using the CARES Act money to stock up. I know the plan for returning to school in November had all of the PPE ready to go. Everything was ready. Those have not been used. They are still here. So based on the assurances of prior administration that they were ready to go in person, I'm going to assume that that is still the case.
Thank you.
But I have not seen the supply stacks myself.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lamas. Dr. Pomponio.
Yes. So some of my questions were answered, but as we've been out of the school, has there been any safety measures put up in the buildings for teacher safety, student safety, such as plexiglass, things like that, to help with, distancing and any contact with the virus? Because I know that stores and banks have put up plexiglass.
Mhm.
Are we going to do those extra measures?
We'll
for the
take that.
classroom?
We will definitely take on as many extra measures as we can and that are available to us. There may be someone on the COLT team can speak about what is physically in the buildings that they worked on getting those in. I don't know if there's anyone there that might be able to weigh in on that piece. I know that all of our secretaries have the plexiglass, sneeze guards, et cetera. Is there anyone from the COLT team that kind of has a good grasp of that right now?
I can speak to what's going on in the high school, at least. We've done things like put tape down on the floors to guide students, divide them each way in the hallway. Any teachers who have been in live do have those plexiglass barriers, and we do have those for everyone. Things like having touchless hand sanitizers throughout the building. As was mentioned, the secretaries have those signs all over. So yeah, there have been many things that have already been done even before we get started.
Good. One of the things I noticed in the presentation that you said no face shields. Is there a reason for that?
Well, it's not that you can't have face shields. It's that you have to wear a mask and a shield. The CDC recommendation is that shields in and of themselves are not effective. So that stopped shields as being an alternative to wear that exclusively. So we still would require a mask to go along with that shield if you wore a
But you're
shield.
not with that point, you're not stating that it absolutely cannot be worn, because there's some students who may put the mask on but have need the shield in addition to
Oh,
the
thank you.
mask. Because,
Yep. Thank you, Darlene, for clarifying that. I should have said,
Yeah.
Under no circumstances will shields exclusively be allowed. They will have to have a mask as well with that. And we also have to say that gaiters are not going to be allowed. Now, gaiters for athletics, MHSAA has authorized them, so we will defer all of the decisions on health and safety for athletics to MHSAA. But I would say that we would not permit gaiters. The scientific evidence of whether or not gaiters are effective barriers on aerosols is really questionable. So we would expect ear loop masks.
Okay, and the other question I have is, do we have an idea of how many teachers would opt to not come back, and would we be short subs? So that's the other concern I have.
Yeah.
If we come back to that.
Mm-hmm. I understand from the information that was gathered prior to November that teachers were asked to bring that in, whether or not they were work restrictions. I will tell you, I do not know what those are right now. We did post for positions now, though, because we recognize that once schools start going in person, there's going to be a high demand. And so we'd like to capture those now. So those postings went out, and regardless of whether or not we're in place on January 25th or February, mid-February or March 1st, they're going to start becoming a part of our community as soon as we get them hired, because we need that security that's there. We will, whatever was requested in November is going to have to be refreshed now based on the information available now. So we will ask for that to be refreshed. In some circumstances, the updated ADA restrictions, work restrictions.
Okay, and so the March 1st date that you mentioned on there, that's something that's left up to the boards to decide. That's not something that was a definite date.
Well, that's
and I think you mentioned it.
Yeah, it's part of the proposal, so again, as we talk about the opportunities to adjust this proposal, if the board wanted to have, if they wanted to continue with the metric and felt comfortable with the metric once they've decided on it, and felt that if we didn't achieve that metric by March 1st, that we would go on March 1st in compliance with the governor's very heavy encouragement to be in person. Then we would have that as an option. But again, that's certainly something that if the board would like to adjust, we can adjust that.
Okay. There was something else I forgot, so I apologize, but thank you for the information.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Paponio. Mr. Craig.
Thank you. I don't have any direct questions about the presentation that was given, but I do want to take the chance here to relay a question that was just given to me by somebody else. Have we tested any of the water in the schools? Because the water hasn't been used for like a year. So apparently some schools started testing when they talked about going back and found Legionnaires in the water. I don't know if we've done any water testing.
I'll ask that to Jacob. I think Jacob is on site.
Yeah, that was just given to me by somebody else. So
Okay. Well, that's on my list of things to find out for you.
Okay.
That's very concerning. Is that schools in this area? Is that you, Jacob?
I don't know.
Yep, here's Jacob.
Know.
Jacob, have we had done any water testing?
Before we had COVID-19 and shut the building down, I did have the building tested. I have not had it tested now. We've just been running water, but
Okay.
I can have it tested, yes.
Yeah, we'll get that information to you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. Mr. Green.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm sure we're going to have the discussion afterwards, so many of my points are going to be discussion points. to bring up when we have a discussion over this, but I do have a couple of questions. One, and maybe interject a comment. Have we checked or been approved with, and Jacob, this might be for you instead of Ms. Irvine, our air filtration systems? And it's because you see I just want to make it clear to the public that every school is different, you know, and every situation is somewhat different. I know we interact, and I know that's going to be a discussion that comes with what rubric we use, if a rubric at all, and the percentage of the rubric. But, you know, the buildings are important. It's not just the shields and this and that. Is where do we have air filtration systems? How's our ventilation systems? Are we a school that is, you know, too enclosed? You know, I know Ford Line interlocks buildings sometimes. So where do we stand with that situation? Because I think that's a pretty important point here.
Mm-hmm. So I understand that this is something that Jacob and I did talk about. I understand that the air filters were recently all replaced. They were replaced with MERV 8 and 9. The recommendation right now is at MERV 13, but some of the concerns that the vendor has regarding MERV 13 is the benefit that they offer usually expires very, very quickly. That they say that it's good for maybe a month or so, and then you have the benefit that might be the extra MERV 13 benefit wear off. However, we know that that's still a recommendation. So I did ask Jacob to produce, to get some quotes on getting the MERV 13 filters into each of the school buildings. Jacob, in terms of structure of the buildings and ventilation, you may be able to comment better on the HVAC or systems that we have in place and how well they're doing.
Well, so far, right now, our ventilation system, most of them has been vacuumed out, cleaned out by our staff. We have, most of our doors have been opened. Our circulation system, so far, is pretty good. Even the units themselves have been vacuumed out and cleaned out from the inside and outside. The coils have been cleaned. Vents have been cleaned as well in each classroom. Again, the conversation that you and I had about the MERV 13, that's the only thing really that I have left if we decide to go down that route. But as far as our school system, I think we're pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
So through the chair, I obviously can't make a personal, request individually. I think that's a discussion to be had. I think if it's a 6 month or a year as we're going through this, that, you know, even at the cost that it may give us, and they only last a month at a MERV 13, so MERV 12 or 13, that's the recommendation is a proper way to go. Just my personal opinion on that.
Yeah, it is significantly more costly, and I know that last fall, but it's worth it. You know, we make the sacrifices we need to make. So absolutely.
Absolutely.
My second question, and this is maybe the teacher coming out in me. Unfortunately, if we do have a quarantine or outbreak of teacher having to be quarantined, COVID-13, have we discussed COVID-13? You know what I mean? Is if we discuss how does that affect, you know, a teacher per se with their sick bank? Is this going to work against them? Are they okay? So I was hoping that was going to be the case. Because I wouldn't think that'd be fair. Okay. What other questions about the rubric? Okay, so so this is something that I guess stuck out to me, and in all honesty, somebody texted me at the same time. Is that you made a comment? I don't know if you misspoke or if I'm hearing this wrong, because I kind of have my opinion on this if it's a discussion. You said that we're going to possibly use a rubric now, but on March 1st, no matter what, we're returning with a strong recommendation of the governor. That comment concerns me somewhat. If there's a new strand coming out, we're at 12-13%. I would think the governor would rescind on that, or the Wayne County Health Department. But I mean, we're not saying that all of a sudden March 1st, if we choose a rubric, that's automatically going away, unless of course something happens in the legislator or the governor that orders us that it's going to go away. We still have to meet every month to month, and Is that correct? Because
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And that's why we're having this conversation now, and everyone wonders why 17 days after you approve the other rubric, we're talking about a new one. Because every month, boards are asked to reconfirm and redecide what their 2021 plan is. So
Right.
we have that.
I know you were on a roll and trying to get all the information out, but I think you said on March 1st, well, we're returning no matter what on March 1st or something along those lines. And I think that was just a little, just wanted to point clarification on that that's not exactly true. So if we adopt a metric, we still have to look every month, and then that, whatever that metric is going to be, approved.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, that would mean that the part of the plan that's revised is that there would be a hard stop or a hard return date. Yeah.
Okay. I think the rest of it's not so much questions. I hear the proposal. I have debate with the board on the proposals and some of my opinions, but I don't have any more questions per se at this point. So I will cede to the president.
Thank you very much, Mr. Green. I also am, one of the benefits of going last is that all my questions, the few questions I had were answered. Also, thank you for having those Q&As with the staff and some of the parents. I sat in on some of those, and I was able to get a lot of my questions answered. So I appreciate that. But I will circle back if anybody has any other questions that we didn't get to. If you could raise your hand now. And if not, then
yes, I do.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
The thing I forgot about was the medical assistants. I think that was an important addition too, because we haven't had any school nurses, and I think that that's an important component, because that's something that we're going to have to fit in if we're going to go back to school. So the 2 for the buildings, I think, is a good addition.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for staff? All right. Seeing none, we will now accept a motion for action item number 1.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to go with no metric remote until January 22nd, 2021, and then in person, remote and virtual beginning January 25th, 2021.
All right. So Dr. Paponio made a motion for on your sheets, option number 2, the no metric version. So remote until January 22nd, 2021, and then in person, remote and virtual beginning January 25th, 2021. Is there a second to her motion?
Just this is Rick. I have a question. Did you read both options or just the second one, Dr. Pomponio?
Just the second one.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Her motion is for number 2.
Thank you.
Any other? Do we have a second on that motion? Okay, motion fails without support. And does anybody else wish to make a motion? At this point, it would be for option 1, which would be the revised metric, in-person, remote, and virtual as presented.
Well, I'd like to make a motion to approve an in-person revised metric, remote, and virtual as presented.
Dr. Pomponio, and I did see Mr. Lamas's hand up. Did you wish to make the second to that motion?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right. Having made that motion, Dr. Pomponio, do you wish to speak to it first?
Yes, I can do that. The revised metric is fine. And I'm not quite sure what the numbers are for Wayne County, but looking at the numbers for Southgate and compared to the other districts, you know, I'm hearing a lot from physicians, students, parents, and there's a lot of information about what may be coming up or what's dangerous or what's happening. But I think if we go through these safety measures and protocols, the students, my biggest thing right now is students need to get back to learning. They need to find some kind of, it's not going to be back to normal, but they need to find some way to get back into the rhythm of learning, because there's special ed students, there's students with IEPs, there's students with learning disabilities. And I've talked to several students from different cities and Southgate as well. And there's a high percentage of students who are feeling lost. They're confused, they're missing assignments, they're straight A students that are failing. And there's an increased depression and anxiety with these students. So I think that we need to move to, with other businesses, gyms, grocery stores, banks, all these other places that are opening up. Kids are out there, they're going to the malls, but they're practicing safe measures, we're hoping. But I think we need to get the students back to the classroom and start learning. And, because we don't know what's going to happen. And I don't want the students to fail or go further and further behind. And besides that, we got other things to consider, such as, we have parents who are struggling with their jobs, and, and I know safety is paramount with teachers, and I've said it before, and with students. But the learning for me is there's just too much time that's going by, and I'm watching these students with increased depression and anxiety. So if we can follow the safety measures and everything that we discussed in the metric and the plan, and just give that option a chance. We've given the remote, we've stayed remote, it's been almost a year. I think we need to get back to in-person learning as well as an option. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lamas, did you want to speak to that?
Yes, thank you. First of all, I wanted to thank all the parents, teachers, and other folks who have emailed us. We got a lot of them, and thank you. And those folks who commented tonight. As you all know, we've been wrestling with this since March. And yes, changes have happened and will continue to. And I personally have had COVID in the family in more than one instance, and have grandkids that have been exposed, fortunately are healthy. So I've lived the fear of a parent and a grandparent. But and so that said, I want everyone to know that everyone that's in this call has considered all the possible, potential things to happen. And I would agree with Dr. Pomponio that I think it's time that we made a move to getting those kids whose parents want them to go back to school, give them that choice, and provide the choice to those teachers and those parents that want to remain remote or use Atlas. So I'm in favor of moving forward with this. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Lamas. Having given the opportunity for those two to speak to their motion, I'll open the floor up to the rest of the board at this point. Anybody wish to speak to this? Mr. Craig.
Thank you. So I appreciate everybody's work on this. I think you guys know this is not an easy decision. It's not something we relish and want to do. But I guess just on a couple of the points, I made some note as we went through for the discussion. And one, I think it's important that we stick to a Wayne County rate. With our school of choice numbers, we're a Wayne County school. That's just all there is to it. We pull kids from all around Wayne County, and I think it's important that we stick to a Wayne County rate. The second thing, the 7-day metric, I have no issue with the 7-day metric because it really is an equivalency of 14 days. So I'm okay with changing the metric. I think it's important that we stick to the Wayne County rate. I don't like the idea of a hard date. March 1st is an arbitrary recommendation, and I'll say the governor did us no favors by coming out and putting that out there, because it supplied nothing other than a hope and a wish. And I mean, my hope and wish was September 1st, and that didn't happen because it wasn't safe to do so. So I'm not interested in a hard date. I don't think vaccinations play into this in any rate, because there's three players here, and we don't seem to be talking about that third player, which is the parents. the parents, the grandparents, the ones who pick up from school, the ones who are there every day. So we have kids, and while it might be true that kids are showing low amounts of symptoms, they are carriers. They are transmitting amongst themselves, and then they do and have the ability to transmit back to parents and grandparents. So that's one of my concerns playing into this. And until vaccines are rolled out to everybody, I don't think vaccines play a role in this. And lastly, I'm going to say the model that I would have to support, and I can't support this model right now because it's not the hybrid. We talked about a hybrid before. We felt hybrid was the safe way to bring kids back. These numbers in the classrooms are just going to be, frankly, too high for me, because I think we're going to be closer to the 3 feet than the 6. We can say 6, but when you get 25 kids in that classroom, it's going to be 3, and it's going to be for an hour, and that to me is the number that I'm kind of uncomfortable with. So I want kids back. I want that option to be there, but to me, I think it's got to be the hybrid, because that's the only way we can keep these numbers low and numbers in the classrooms low, so we can space kids out. And that was part of our discussion before. That was what we had all agreed to before, and that's where I feel strong. So I won't be able to support this option. I am in favor of a metric that brings kids back, but just in a hybrid model. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Craig. If Mr. Sage, Mr. Freitas, or Mr. Green wish to speak, we'll accept those discussion topics now. Mr. Sage.
With you. So kind of going back to August, a similar situation. I believe that our kids need to be back in front of the educators, and the safest, the best. There's no easy answers. We can all say it over and over and over again. Going to this point right here, Jason brings up about the Wayne County, which I can completely understand. What percentage of students are students of choice or school of choice?
39%.
29.
39?
That's just 29.
Yep.
20. Okay. And do we have an area? Do we know where those kids are coming from?
Yeah, they're predominantly coming from Taylor. They're coming from Lincoln Park. Those are the two bigger ones. Some from River Rouge, some from Ecorse, fewer from Wyandotte, fewer from Riverview. So some from Allen Park, but fewer.
I'd just be curious to know how many outside of the downriver area were coming into that percentage, because as far as the rubric, I understand what Jason's saying completely about using Wayne County, but downriver is we can pull the downriver numbers. If we see that 29% of, if we have 25% coming from Lincoln Park, Taylor, these surrounding areas, and 2 from Ecorse or wherever it may be, I would suggest using the downriver numbers. If we pooled the cities and then, averaged it out. The 7-day metric I'm fine with. The hybrid, I'm also, that's something that I brought up a while back. The issue also then comes into the parents, the parents that are working, the parents that are trying to now go from, teaching their kids all day, and then now we go to a hybrid and we got to choose every other day. It's going to be hard enough for the parents with just Wednesdays off, to work out with their employer. The one thing that we haven't done in this whole time is give the parents that want their kids in school a choice. The remote, the Atlas have all been there. With the parents that wanted their kids in school haven't had the option, because they haven't had the option to do so. But then again, we want the teachers as safe as possible. So if all the factors are there, the mitigation factors, I'd support the plan, but I'd like to know as far as going from the Wayne County to the downriver numbers. That's all I got.
Thanks, Mr. Sage. Mr. Freitas or Mr. Green? You guys have anything?
Neil?
Mr. Green? Go ahead, Mr. Green.
Neil, do you have anything? No, I can't hear you, so I don't know.
No, I was hitting the wrong button.
Okay. Yeah, I'm torn on a couple of things, and I shared this with Sharon, and I shared this with community members and some of the board members. I haven't had the opportunity to talk to all the board members. And I'm probably going to go into the position where I'm going to make everybody angry, but in the last year, you know, what else is new? So first of all, I think one thing for me is we can, because it happens, but, you know, all too often what has happened in this is you can skew numbers any way you want. Actually, you know, I was kind of throwing my math at one of our math teachers here in the district earlier and said, am I right about this? I'm not right about that. If you extract certain information or put it back in, then your numbers change. So, but some things are really bother me, and you know, I'm on the parent page because I'm a parent, so I see it, and you know, nobody likes to get called out or called names or whatever, and I'm sure it's going to happen again. But you know, I got big shoulders, and I mean, I've given my phone number personally out to people, and I'll stand by it. And you can get my phone number from people and call me and talk to me if you want to in a respectful way. But a couple of things that are fallacies here as we discuss this. One, we are not the only school district downriver who has never been in school. I mean, you can argue that all you want and how you look at it, but Dearborn has never been in school. River Rouge has never been in school. Melvindale has never been in school. And even now, we're not the only district that hasn't gone back yet. Allen Park tabled their discussion yesterday. They're not back yet. They're looking to change the rubric. So that's not true. The other issue is that we don't listen to the parent surveys. Well, I guess we don't listen to everybody's. We can't listen to both sides and give you the right answer, because every survey has been 55% or 58% to 42%. I suppose there's a simple majority in some degree, but if we talk about having no metric, for example, 66% or sorry, about 60% of what I've seen of the parents said they wanted a metric. If we talk about return to school from what was given to the board today, there was about 10% who wanted March 1st, and then about 45 and 46% that wanted no or a hard return on January 25th, and then others that wanted, to wait and see. So if we don't fit what everybody wants, it's because we don't have 100% clear-cut answers from the community, and so just because we're not siding, I guess, or making the decision on your side, doesn't mean that the surveys or what's asked you doesn't matter, because the other person's idea matters also, and their thought process matters. So all too often, I think we're picking and choosing our side and we're not looking at the bigger picture of what we collectively in this group had to deal with, which is to look at everything. And again, I have a 7th grader in this district. I have to make the same choices that the parents here have to make. I'm not somebody that doesn't have a stake in the game. I'm a teacher in a different district. I have to see these same rubrics and go back and teach. And am I getting a vaccine? Am I not? Just like other teachers that I know here. So I have somebody who's a teacher that lives with me, that's teaching, a kindergartner that's trying to do work online, a college student doing work online, and a 7th grader. So yes, I do understand what it's like for everybody to run around the house and how hard it is. So I just want to get that out there. My issues are a little different with this rubric. I do think there has to be a metric, and I don't think 5% is the answer. I know that was what it was earlier in the fall and what the recommendation was, but this is such a fluid motion that if we're going to follow the science of what the CDC and other groups say, then we got to follow the science of what the CDC and the health department say now. And they've changed, and I'm sorry that they've changed. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a doctor, so I try to get some information personally. It's hard, that 3 to 6 foot part. I understand that. It's concerning. I understand that. It's, but also, the health departments have moved that 14-day average back to 7. And as we're looking at that data, looking at schools that have transmitted diseases or haven't, that and there have been schools, obviously there's been people that have had transmissions, but they seem to know more now about younger people transmitting or not transmitting. So that's changed the game. So for me personally, this is just one person, and I would say her name, so this not a fictional person. She works in Lansing General Hospital. She is an epidemiologist, and I've asked her, and I've asked some nurses, and what she said, and I've heard this somewhat from a CDC advisor too, is that we're fixated with 5% to like 9%. If you get to 11, 12, 13, that's different. 5 to 9%, and this is coming from a doctor, not me, isn't, in her opinion, that much of a difference. To her, it's 4 out of 100 people, and you're almost as likely to get it if you're at a 5% rate than a 9% rate. Okay? To me, I don't like having 2 different rubrics. I don't think it's inherently that we send, I know it's a recommendation from the government to some degree, an elementary school, middle school with one rubric and a high school with another rubric. If 5 to 9%, which is what we're talking about, is basically, according to what some doctors say, the same idea, why don't we meet in the middle and say our hard rubric is 7% for Wayne County or for Southgate or the area, because we're almost there, right? We're at 8% for Southgate. I know there's moving parts. I go teach in Oakland County, it happens, but where we're getting kids from, the rate's down. And when we're using really 2 different rubrics here, if you use the COVID-19, you add Detroit, which is 10%. If you take Detroit out and you use some of the downriver, I'm sure that average is going to be close to that 7.5 or 8%. I also understand we haven't used every school downriver in the examples that we had. You know, if we sit here and have, and if we do, and we're going to phase them in, I guess okay, but I'm more of one rubric that meets the standard for the entire district. That's just my opinion from whom I've talked to in the medical field. That's a lot smarter than this than I am. Okay, and I'm not saying that I think there's going to be, this is a perfect scenario. I don't think it's a perfect scenario. It's a little scary for some, and you do have the option to stay home. And way back when, I believe I was the first one who asked for online for teachers, not Atlas, for students. And now we have that option. So now we can have an option for all 3 phases with safety measures put into place for parents to make their choice. And I just don't like that separate rubric. So that's the part of it I don't like. But if this is the way we're going, it's almost like I want to vote down half of it or discuss changing that rubric to be more consistent for me. But I do think kids need to get back to school. I do think the evidence shows that it's not transmitted as much. Not that it won't be, and those parents will now have a choice to have a live teacher or for Atlas. I agree, with all due respect to Mr. Craig, who I respect dearly, that I would rather see a downriver rubric model more so than a Wayne County rubric model, if that's the way we're heading. And then I do want to reiterate the fact that March 1st, if everything goes up, of course, this is out the window. We have a rubric. If it goes 10, 11, 12, I'm sure that the state or the governor or somebody is going to, they're going to shut us down again anyway if a new strand or something like that runs rampant. That's my thoughts. That's where I'm at. I also think I do agree with Mr. Craig on this. I do think that we're playing a dangerous game if we don't have a backup plan of a hybrid plan. The great unknown is how many parents are going to choose when this comes back hardcore to come back. If there's 70 or 75 or 80%, then that 15 to 16 or 20 kids in a classroom is going to go out the door. And now you're going to have 25, 26, 27. That I think is dangerous. And so for that, I also believe there has to be some sort of a hybrid plan as a backup, although it's not the perfect option. So I agree with a metric. I don't agree with a different metric. And I don't agree with the fact that we don't have some sort of a hybrid plan in place as a for instance. And that's an answer we won't know until we come back to school and see how many kids are in the building to see if we have to make that adjustment. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Green. I intend on supporting this motion. I do hear from, I've heard a couple consistencies between a few of my fellow board members regarding the hybrid model, regarding some more specific data as far as to our specific area. But I think I think we need to proceed and give as much time as we can to get this process going. And I believe that we have to revisit this in another 30 days. So I think that we can tweak it as we're doing now. And there's some more homework that needs to be made, as Mr. Green had pointed out, some things that we're not going to know until we know. So my intention is to support this motion. I think it's a good start. I think it's a solid plan for what we have right now. There's definitely things that we could do better, and I think that we need to make adjustments along the way. Any other discussion on this topic before we call the vote? All right, Ms. Grahowski, will you please call the vote? Oh, sorry, Mr. Sage.
So as far as with the motion and how the motion is, what numbers are we talking? Are we talking Wayne County numbers, or are we talking downriver numbers?
Ms. Irvine?
The motion itself is Wayne County. It may, I did hear downriver supported a couple of ways or a couple of moments through conversation. So I don't know if it might be a good idea to poll the full board to see if how many are in agreement with downriver or with Wayne County versus downriver. And if we can find some polling here, we can adjust the plan to make that accommodation. I mean, that's a possibility.
Mr. Craig?
We can't do that. We have a motion on the table. That motion would have to be amended. If we were going to do that, we'd have to vote on the amendment. You can't poll during a motion.
Right.
Point of order.
Thank you.
Mr. Sage, was that it? Okay.
Yeah, that was it. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Green?
So I think we're in a really difficult situation here, because we have a motion on the floor, but I think a majority of us are looking to have a different type of rubric that's easier to come back to school, but still safe within that medium perimeter. But this motion is going to stay with Wayne County, which is where we're at 10 or 11%. So, I mean, I'm leaning to, if I deny this motion, it's going to be for a totally different reason than Mr. Craig. It's going to be because I think we need to revisit what rubric we're using. I just, I don't know what people think about that.
Dr.
Okay,
Pompon?
Mr. President, can I amend the motion to include downriver, the downriver metric?
So you, Dr. Paponi was the initial one that made the motion. She wishes to amend her motion. Are you agreeable to that amendment, Rick?
I think we have to vote on this, and those that don't like the rubric or whatever reason don't like this can vote no. If I'm not mistaken, I'm not Mr. Robert's Rules of Orders. Jason,
I rely on Mr. Craig for that.
The amendment would require support, then discussion, then a vote, and that's only on the amendment. Then we would go back to the original motion, and we could vote on the original motion or on the amended motion.
But does the original motion, the person, like, would it have to be Rick who made the to agree on the amendment?
No, anybody can support the amendment, because we're only talking about the amendment. We're not talking about the whole motion right now. There's a motion on the table now for an amendment. So that would need support. That would need to be discussed and then voted on. And again, we are only voting on the amendment portion.
All right.
Then it goes to either back to the original motion or voting on the amended motion.
Okay, understood. Thank you. All right. So Dr. Pomponio has amended her original motion to include the downriver community. Do you wish to, instead of making the generic, do you wish to highlight communities? I mean, that could be I think that you need to list, in my personal opinion, my suggestion would be to list the communities in which you wanted to see. It's a generic term saying downriver.
Downriver to include Taylor, Lincoln Park, Riverview, and Wyandotte, our sister communities.
That would include Allen Park too. I mean, if you're going to talk about the surrounding communities, I'm sorry to interrupt, Dr. Pomponio.
Okay.
If you're going to me, go ahead. When I'm done. Darlene, Dr.
Okay.
P, are you done?
Oh, yes, go ahead.
So I think if we're going to, I mean, downriver subjective.
Hey, Andy, we have to have a second to that motion first. And then
I don't know what the motion is. We're talking about downriver, and what are we being specific? Downriver means different things to different people.
That's what I was asking, but she did list some schools. So Dr. Irvine, what schools do you have?
Okay.
Or Dr. Paponio, sorry.
To be clear, to list the sister neighborhoods would be Taylor, Lincoln Park, Allen Park, Wyandotte, Riverview, and River Rouge.
Riverview Rouge or Riverview?
Both, because we have school of choice in those, from those.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll support it.
All right. So we have a motion on the table for an amendment to our original motion by Dr. Paponio, supported by Mr. Green. Can we roll call vote that amend? I'm sorry. Go ahead. Discussion first. Sorry. Discussion first. Anybody wish to speak to this amended motion?
So just to make sure I'm clear, if I can, Mr. President, the motion is to move from a Wayne County metric to the 4 or 5 communities that you just mentioned. Correct? Is that right, Dr. Pomponio?
Yes.
I have one question on the heels of that. Dr. Irvine, the communities you listed earlier in your presentation that you compared the positive percentages with, are those communities represented in that list that you showed us?
We do not have Lincoln Park or Taylor in those, or River Rouge in there.
Okay, all right.
So of those lists, those are not in there.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Any other discussion? Mr. Sage?
Those numbers would be transparent on the website for all the community to see, correct?
Yes, I would make an adjustment to add those. I think the question is if we're averaging all of those or if we're keeping a Southgate. I mean, that's just a simple mathematic task, but I just want to make sure that I understand how we're going to calculate that.
I would be under the assumption we'd be averaging.
Right.
Mr. Craig?
So I guess just to point out, Southgate is part of that, right? That was part of that list. I went kind of quick. I missed it.
Yeah, I think she said Southgate and including the surrounding communities.
Okay. So we can have an average, and again, this is just for discussion. So we can have an average of 14, and that's where the majority of our school, comes from. We could have an average of 14, but somebody else has an average of 4. That pulls us down. I guess I'm really concerned with why we're complicating this. I think Wayne County is a pretty simple metric. I think you either go Wayne County or you go Southgate. Why we make this muddy or why we make it more complicated than it needs to be, I don't know. But I don't think I'm going to be able to support the modification.
All right, Mr. Lamas.
Thank you. I think we have a distinction here without a difference. If anything has been clear, the experts are doing their best and they have a modicum of certainty they can come to us all with anything. So I think to make sure that for a plan to work, it's got to be measurable and it's got to be simple. And I think we use the Wayne County metrics and we stay with the motion as it was originally declared. Thank you very much for letting me speak.
Thank you, Mr. Green.
So my issue now is I would probably vote this down personally, because we're using the Wayne County metric. We're not at the 9%. We're not going to be back to school, even though Southgate has 8%, 8.5%, which as the majority of our students, we're at 10.6 as Wayne County right now. We're not going to be at 9%, and we're definitely not going to be at 5% by January 25th. So, you know, you're looking at not coming back to school for quite some time if that's where we're staying. And so for that reason, and this proposal, if this amendment fails or whatever, I mean, I'm going to vote it down just because I think that's going to prevent us from coming to school sooner. Just my 2 cents.
I agree with that statement.
Yeah, this is getting confusing. I want a no metric at all. Okay,
Yeah.
what do we do now if I want to just keep it to Wayne County?
Well, we have to vote on the motion, but Mr. Craig has his hand up, and then I'll get back to you on that.
Okay.
Mr. From the numbers, from the chart, what was the Southgate percentage right now?
It's 8, little over 8%.
Little over 8 right now. Okay.
Yes.
So if we adopt just the Southgate metric, elementary would be going back. High school, middle school wouldn't.
Elementary and middle school would go back.
Middle school is going to go with okay. So high school is still out.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Pamponi, I think to answer your question, we have to vote this up or down, and then we can proceed with either a different amendment or whatever. All right. So any other discussion on that? If not, we'll call this amendment vote to question.
I would like to ask a question in regards to that, Tim.
Okay.
So in regards to Andy's discussion about having the same percentage for the across the board as far as a rubric per se, that is not part of this discussion at all, correct, for this amendment?
Correct. This is specifically about a measurement tool versus Wayne County for a metric, not a rubric. Yeah. All right, I'm going to call the question, Ms. Grahowski.
Mr. Green,
Yes, I guess.
Mr. Lamos,
No.
Dr. Pomponio,
Yes.
Mr. Sage,
Yes.
Mr. Craig,
No.
Mr. Estheimer,
No.
Mr. Freitas,
Yes.
What are your results on that vote?
4 yeses, 3 nos.
All right, so the amendment to the motion has passed. All right. And now, is there any further discussion on the topic itself before we call a vote on that? Mr. Green.
I'm just going to state clearly that I will vote yes for this amendment under the understanding that I still truly believe that the metric should be the same for all schools. But if this is how we're going to get some of the kids back in front of students sooner, I'll support it on that front. But I just believe that the metric, if there's not much of a difference between 5 and 9, according to a doctor, why we're having 2 different rubrics. But if this is where we're at and it gets us back sooner, I'll support it. But I just want to let everybody know that I have an issue with 2 different metrics.
Any other discussion? Mr. Craig.
Oh, sorry.
So just to clarify, we're voting on the or discussing and then voting on the amended motion, which is the presented plan with the new metric. But now we're just, instead of Wayne County, we're taking into account the named communities and averaging them. So that's the only modification we have to the original, and I guess that's what can be discussed now and then eventually voted on. So,
Correct.
all right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Sage, did you have something?
Well, I don't want to talk topic here in regards to this, but when we talk about the number of kids coming back, I'm getting a lot of feedback here. I don't know why, but the number of kids that is unknown of coming back in the event we're going 4 days a week, and this is a question to be posed, and a parent doesn't feel comfortable for whatever reason sending their kid all 4 days, and they send them 2 days, so they're almost do their own hybrid, right? They send their kid 2 days and then keep them home 2 days online. so they're still checking in. Is that considered absent, or is that completely off topic right now?
Just as a point of clarification, I can answer your question on that. The teacher will take attendance whether individual is in person or live or participating remotely.
Okay.
They will be counted present.
Thank you.
Do you have any other discussion? Mr. Green?
So Ms. Irvine, if per se we have 70% of students coming back and we have 25 students in a classroom, I would like to kind of go down the road again of what Mr. Craig had talked about. When we meet again to reconvene in February, if we're back by then now, is there going to be a backup plan of a hybrid for that? Because again, that's the great unknown. If we have 50% of the students coming and 50% don't, then the social distancing makes it easier. But as Mr. Craig had noted, is that if 70 or 75% of the students come and we don't have a backup plan for hybrid, we have 25, 26 kids in the classroom, and that poses a problem.
Right. So, in this particular situation, the board might consider reevaluating this a little sooner than next February. And I just say that because there may be an important shift to this plan, to the mode of instruction that is necessary for us to make sure that there is some social distancing in those classrooms. So we could bring this forward at the next board meeting. We could hold an emergency board meeting after we find out what the commitment levels are and see how the school district intends to adjust to that. So those are some other, those are a couple of different things. I know that I don't want to give the public the impression that we're going to reconvene more than once a month to reconsider this mode, because this is disconcerting for the public to have what they believe are plans in place to have them changed anyway. So certainly the idea that that's going to change at any point in time, but I do think this is a moment in time in which we may want to come back and hear what the districts received on the commitment level and how they're responding.
I agree.
Understood. All right. Any more discussion on this?
One last thing, Tim.
Yep.
Would there be a motion for an amendment of this if we wanted to clarify and have it across the board with the percentages?
You'd have to do just like we did before. If you want to amend this motion, you'd have to make a motion to amend this specific motion, list the details of that amendment. You'd have to get a second on that, and we would have discussion at that point, and then we would call the question to add that amendment to this motion, and then we would do a final vote on the final motion with the one or two amendments. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
I just want to jump in, and my team has asked me to clarify the fact that when I talk about the ability to remotely or to count attendance for those who show up in person and remote, those are when we have the concurrent instructional models happening in the classroom. That's not true for elementary, just as a point of clarification.
All right. Any other discussion before we call the question? All right. Ms. Grahowski, will you please call the question?
Mr. Freitas,
Yes.
Mr. Estheimer,
Yes.
Mr. Craig,
No.
Mr. Sage,
Yes.
Dr. Pomponio,
Yes.
Mr. Lamos,
Yes.
Mr. Green.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 6-1. Thank you all. Thanks everybody for your hard work on that and a crash course in Robert's Rules of Orders. I appreciate Craig for his help on that. Okay, and Dr. or Ms. Irvine, I hope that you will please keep us posted as we get those results in, and then we can make a decision and get that information out as soon as possible to the board and to the public if we do need to meet again prior to our next board meeting. Yeah. Yes.
Yes, I think one of the first things we need to do is update our averages so that we understand where we fall currently, and that will be done immediately, so that it can be up there this evening.
All right, let's move on now to action item number 2, which is IT Design Services Award Recommendation. Go ahead. Who's presenting this?
I believe I will just go ahead and let you know that we did receive we did send out for contracted services for the IT design portion. And Plant Moran did collect these bids. They want to award that to Plant Moran Cressa would like to award that to Plant Moran as the successful bidder in that contract series.
Okay, thank you. Having looked that over, would anybody be willing to make a motion on action item number 2?
Mr. President,
Yes, go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the award of the IT design service contract for the 2020 bond program to Plant Moran.
Thank you. And do we have a second? We have a second for that motion. Mr. Craig? All right.
I'll support.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. And Dr. Paponi, do you wish to speak to your motion?
No, not at this time.
All right, Mr. Craig. All right. If anybody else would like to speak, now would be an opportunity to ask questions of staff. Mr. Lamas.
Yes, just a couple questions. Did we have multiple bids? Were there different folks that we considered for this other than Plant Moran and Plant Moran Cressa?
So we did initially, we did just get pricing from Plant Moran. With the last bond program, Plant Moran IT is a separate entity from Plant Moran Cressa, but Plant Moran had been working with the district previously through the 2015 bond, and even before that. So when this bond had come around and we were looking at getting design services, we talked with Wendy, we talked with Jill, and asked if we wanted to get multiple prices or get a proposal from Plant Moran first and evaluate it. And the direction was given to reach out to Plant Moran, get a proposal, and then we can evaluate it. So we did that, and then we had a couple successive meetings after that to review the proposals. We had gotten a couple different revised proposals, gone back and forth, and the fees that had come back with the services that were to be provided for all the IT work and all the design work associated with it. Jill and Wendy had felt comfortable moving forward with Plant Moran based on the previous relationships and the fee that they'd come in with, along with, we compared it to pricing on other proposals and programs that we have had to make sure that it was in line with what we're seeing in the marketplace right now. So that was really how we got to this stage right now. We did not put it out for a formal proposal.
Thank you. And so there must be some uniquely compelling advantages for not considering another party to be involved in the bidding on this.
Just with the experience that Plant Moran has working with the district for the IT part, going back to Mike Tashi and before that, in previous bond programs. I don't know exactly, but I believe they've been working with the district for 10, 20 years now. In various components. And actually in the last bond program, Mike Tashi really dealt with them direct. I didn't have any involvement with them in the last program. Mike really handled all the IT work direct with them himself. So, when it came around this time, I had asked Wendy and Jill, do we want to, engage Plant Moran again? They had done the facility assessment or the IT assessment prior to the bond that we incorporated. And they'd asked, let's make sure the fee's in line. And then they came back with a very competitive fee that we felt was in line. So I wanted to bring it to you to keep them on board with the past work they've done with you guys.
And who would be overseeing and making sure oversight on the spend and the execution and the ultimate implementation? Who's going to be responsible for that? So we avoid a football field situation.
Yep. So Plant Moran, they will be the designer of record. They will oversee all the bidding, the construction administration related to that. And then they will also be more incorporated with the overall bond program. So they will be reporting to, myself and Sharon and Wendy and the rest of the administration involved to oversee that. So, they will work on putting the bid packs out, developing those scopes of work, and then overseeing the construction administration for the actual IT contractors that would be working on the job. But they'll all be reporting back up through the chain to myself and Sharon and the rest of the administration team.
Thank you. Through the chair, may I ask Dr. Irvine a question?
Certainly.
So, Mr. Irvine, are you comfortable with the oversight on this and where we are with this? I obviously you probably interacted with Wendy and those team and those folks.
Yeah, I understand that the relationship on the IT side has been a strong one. So I'm simply going to go ahead and take the recommendation of the prior administration that had already moved this forward and placed it for the agenda for today. I have no reason to question it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Sage.
First, I want to say I love Coach Tashi. He's awesome. So going on with that, so he's a great man. But in regards to getting the competitive bids, what's the negative? Are we delaying the process? Is it? I just don't understand why we wouldn't get at least three, two more bids to have always three bids to compare something. That's the way I've always done it. That's just my thought. So I understand the relationship, but sometimes you get comfortable in a relationship and it doesn't work out to your favor. So I'd be curious if we did get bids, what would be the negative to doing that?
Yeah.
Time, I guess time would be one, but I mean, we definitely could. We had just reviewed with, we looked at other proposals that we had received for other projects and where fees were coming in, and they were lower than what we were seeing on other bid projects for other similar size scopes or larger scopes of work. Their fees were as low or lower than some we were seeing. So based on where they were at, if they had come in, say, 2% higher or whatever that was, and we were seeing fees, lower than what they were at, then, that was definitely one of the alternates or the options we were looking at. But based on where the fees were with what we're seeing in the marketplace, the direction was just, they're in line and we have a past working relationship with them. So we felt it was fair and considered moving forward with it, but we could look to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Craig.
I don't want to, I guess sound like I'm defending it. I did support the motion, and I don't even know if this is necessary to bid because whenever you're talking about professional services, and again in the public sector, professional services like the design or like picking an architect or something like that, it's not altogether uncommon that those aren't bid out. That they just kind of, especially if you have a relationship, a strong relationship, there's a lot of things, and we could get a lower number. That doesn't mean we're going to get a better product or a better service. And so, yeah, when you're dealing with somebody who has that inherent knowledge and that base of relationship, sometimes just with professional services, it can be an advantage not to drag them out to bid, not to make them put numbers on it. Again, they could be competing against somebody who has no idea what they're doing for us. And then we're stuck into a different position where we're trying to defend a higher bid. So yeah, just coming from my experience with the public sector like this, it's a little bit different. So just my 2 cents.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, when we started the program originally, with TMP Architecture, they were the architect for the last bond program, we kind of started the same process as we reached out to them first, got some proposals. looked at where the fee was. We evaluated those with what we were seeing in the marketplace, what we were seeing in other school districts. And their proposal was in line with what we were seeing. So felt comfortable with getting the team back together on the architect side. Then we did the same thing on the CM side. And actually the CM pricing was substantially higher. And we negotiated with them probably 4 or 5 different times to try to get them more in line with what we were seeing in the marketplace. And the contractor, wouldn't come down to where we thought was reasonable. So we went ahead and put it out to bid and, got the results back. And the pricing was quite a bit lower, where we thought they should be, and they wouldn't get there. So we did evaluate those, and we kind of did the same process with the IT that we did with the architect and the CM.
And thank you. I have one more question. Rob, are the folks that are listed on the staffing pages, are they the folks that are going to be doing the work?
Yes, as far as the design work, yes, they're the folks that the district would be dealing with through the duration of the project.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Irvine.
Any other questions? I don't see any other hands up. All right. I will accept a motion here for action item number 2 then.
We already had a motion in support.
Oh, pardon me. All right. Well, we'll call the question then.
Mr. Lamos,
Yes.
Dr. Pomponio,
Yes.
Mr. Sage,
Yes.
Mr. Craig,
Yes.
Mr. Estheimer,
Yes.
Mr. Freitas,
Yes.
Mr. Green.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries. All right. Action item number 3. This is approval of the purchase of is it pronounced Phonic Robotics cert cart?
I do believe it's Fanuc.
Fanuc. All right. Thank you. According to board policy number 5003, all items that exceed 30,500 must be brought to the board for approval. This purchase exceeds the required amount. We are requesting approval of the purchase of this Fanuc Robotics cert cart in the amount of $33,439. This cart will be used by the DCTC Mechatronics program and funded from the budget allocated to this program. Ms. Irvine, do you have any other information on this that you wish to present?
Yes, I'm going to go ahead and transfer this to Mark, who is going to give you a little more information about it, and also kind of talk through why there may not have been a bidding process on this or quotes.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so thank you for having me. As you just said, as the Anderson CTE director, it is my responsibility to seek approval from the board for any purchase over $3,500, and this is a purchase well over $3,500, which is $33,439. This is for a Southgate class. This is Mr. Ibegbu, is the mechatronics teacher that operates out of the flat rack assembly plant. It is a Southgate class, but it is supported by the DCTC program, which is the Downriver Career and Technical Consortium that offers or supports these classes financially in many ways. So I am asking for approval for this, but at the same time, I will let you know that this is monies that would be reimbursed to Southgate School District by DCTC. They are going to fully fund this purchase. So I'm going to read a little product overview. The Fanuc ER4IA Robotics Cert Cart is designed with students in mind. This all-in-one robotic training bundle enables young people to gain firsthand experience of programming and operating cutting-edge industrial robotics. The package content is highly relevant for modern factory applications and contains everything instructors require to teach students to program and operate robots. Fanuc offers the only national certifications for robot operations, programming, integrated vision, and Industry 4.0 connected smart manufacturing. So a little product overview, and then benefits to our Southgate students and other students that might be attending these classes through the DCTC. Fanuc is a global company that offers students an opportunity for industry recognized certifications in robotics and advanced automation manufacturing. This will give students an opportunity to be employable in a career that will offer them a guaranteed livable income after they graduate with us. And it will also supply them with skills that they can be proud of, that they've earned and will be able to utilize in that career. To the point about the single bid, the FNUC CERT program and educational products can only be purchased through IST, which is where this request is coming through. And it only is offered to educational institutions. This fact that this is the only supplier or vendor to be able to purchase this from, this has been verified by a letter from FNUC and by the director of the Downriver Career Technical Consortium. He has verified that this is the only vendor that offers this product. So the sale price offered to DCTC and thus Southgate Community School District is significantly discounted from the price that would be offered to a commercial or industrial customer. If approved, this purchase will be made by Southgate Community School District, but the entire amount will be reimbursed by DCTC. The 3-bid requirement for a purchase of over $3,500 has been waived by DCTC for this purchase and this product, and they have approved the purchase as of now. We are just here today to ask for your approval of this purchase, and we request that the Southgate Community School District Board of Education also waive the 3-bid requirement since there are no other vendors for this product.
Through the chair, can I ask a question or can I make a comment? You're on mute. You're on mute.
Sorry, yes, we are opening up for questions for staff right now. Go ahead, Mr. Lamas.
Thank you. I asked a few of the questions. Mr. Hanson, thank you very much for coming to the meeting, especially as late as we are tonight. Thank you very, very much.
No problem.
It is exciting to see this kind of technology showing up and being useful. I mean, there's so many employers around Detroit that use that exact technology. So it's great to see our students have access to that. I was aware that it was a special product for education, but I wasn't aware of the special circumstances with CTC and the other organization you mentioned. So thanks for taking the time to address my questions. I really appreciate it, and good luck with the program.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lamas. Does anybody else have any questions?
Mr. President.
Statement. First of all, Mark, I think it's amazing. I think it's great. Is there any other school systems that are going to those classes?
Yes, there are multiple schools that are associated with DCTC that they actually where the hub where DCTC is located is at the Flat Rock Assembly Plant, right where that class is held. And they do bus students from all over the Downriver community from different school districts to that area.
So is there a reason Southgate's taking this on as opposed to collaborating with other cities or schools?
This is a Southgate Anderson class. The teacher is employed by Southgate Anderson. It is our class that outside students can come to.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Pomponio.
Okay, so I have a question. There are 11 to 15 robots for students. And how big are they?
They're kind of in a box. I don't have the exact dimensions in front of me, but they're approximately 3 feet wide, 3 feet deep, and 5 feet tall.
Okay. Thank you on that. And then I wanted to make a comment for the viewing audience that this particular program, Mechatronics, has been proven time after time to bring in employers around the community to employ our students. So kudos to the program. Thank you.
Hear, hear.
So
I will give that credit to Mr. Ibegbu, since he is the one teaching those courses.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion for action item number 3.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to approve the purchase of the FNUC Robotics CERT cart in the amount of $33,439 from the Downriver Career Technical Consortium budget.
Thank you, Dr. Pomponio. Is there a second?
Support.
Supported
Go
by,
ahead.
supported by
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Supported by Mr. Lamas. All right, and for discussion, I will go back first to Dr. Pomponio. Did you wish to discuss, since you made the motion? Have any further discussion?
Nothing further at this time.
Okay, and Mr. Lamas, did you have anything further you wish to add?
No, sir.
All right, I'll open it up to the rest of the floor. Any discussion? Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, we'll ask Ms. Grahowski to please call the question.
Dr. Pomponio,
Yes.
Mr. Sage,
Yes.
Mr. Craig,
Yes.
Mr. Estheimer,
Yes.
Mr. Freitas,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Lamos.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Motion carries. Congratulations. All right. All right. That concludes our action items for the evening. Next is item I, or employee representatives. Are there any employee representatives that wish to address the board tonight? Seeing none, we'll go to board member comments. Item J, information and announcements. Does anybody have any announcements or information that they would like to go over tonight with everybody?
Mr. President?
Dr. Pomponio.
I have a couple things. The first one, I want to welcome to the district, Dr. Irvine. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to working with you. And the second, I want to acknowledge my each of my fellow board members. This is Board Appreciation Month. I want to just let you know that I appreciate your service, the work you've done, and the commitment that you have for the district and the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pomponio. I appreciate that. Any other board members wish to have any information announcements at this time?
I almost never do this. I don't think I've ever done it. I just wanted to say welcome to Mr. Irvine as well, and looking forward to working with you.
Likewise. And I'd like to chime in and say my appreciation. I know I haven't gotten a chance to this is our first time together working, but this is Board Appreciation Month. And I know that Jill honored and kind of provided that recognition in advance of her leaving, but I also want to make sure that I let you know how difficult your work is, and how noteworthy it is in this community, and how much respect you have from this community. So that really speaks to your work with them on a daily basis. So thank you for the hard work. It doesn't get any easier for 2021.
Any other information announcements? I will just say a couple words on Facebook today. And the last couple of days, I've been excited to see all the pictures of the posts from parents and their students holding up their Honor Society letters. And that was pretty exciting to see, just the joy on their faces and trying to have some sort of sense of normalcy in this craziness, and the fact that they were chosen for the Honor Society and they were able to celebrate with their families. That's great. I did hear Mr. Irvine ask someone the other day to email those pictures to her. Perhaps she might do something special on our Facebook page. So if you guys wouldn't mind doing that, her email is found on our website. And also, thanks to this board as well. It not only being Board Appreciation Month, but I thank you for the confidence you showed in your vote tonight for me to continue in this position. Let me just back up. I wanted to say congratulations to Brooklyn and Jackson as part of that shout out. We had a board member whose kids also received some of that love on Facebook for their Mr. Sage's children for the Honor Society letters. So, and then also some friends, Gabby, Ty, and Bridget. I know that they are fast asleep at this time, I'm sure, but a little shout out to them. And that is it. And I was going to mention here just at the very end, but he's probably asleep too. We're welcoming Andy, our newest principal over at Ford Line, to the team. Thank you all very much. And without any further comments, we will accept the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, Mr. Lamas, second.
Support.
Support.
Supported by Mr. Craig, and any other discussion? No? Okay. If we could roll call vote that, please.
Mr. Sage,
Yes.
Mr. Craig,
Yes.
Mr. Estheimer,
Yes.
Mr. Freitas,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Lamos,
Yes.
Dr. Pomponio.
Yes.
Thank you. It is 9:49 and we are now adjourned. Thanks everybody for staying up so late, and thanks for those in the viewing audience for sticking around. Ms. Irvine, you'll post on the website as soon as possible what that motion was. I'm getting a lot of requests from people that were